Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're going to be talking about The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackwith. Now, I stumbled upon this book by happenstance. It was on my Goodreads front page as a recommended for you because you read this other book, and I don't remember what book that was, but the cover looked nice. I was like, the idea sounds nice. Let's jump into it. And little did I know what a mistake that would be, because if you are wondering why there were no videos last week, it's because of this book. I was so depressed. I could not be bothered to do anything. And it's not only because of this book, but conversations surrounding this book, ideas about this book, some relationships that also tied into this entire situation. And we'll get into that. Just one of the problems was that I had started reading this and I was 4 or 5 chapters in when I met with somebody, and I recommended the book because I was really enjoying how it was started. And I'd recommended it to like 2 or 3 other people. And the other thing is that when you have anything with library in the title or as a main character, there are stereotypes surrounding libraries and librarians, partially as very large egos, thinking that they are freedom fighters. Like you can actually see in conversations, especially around like the ALA and all that, is there is this martyrdom, this savior complex that revolves kind of around this stereotype. And then you look at the author who has like the big rimmed glasses and the shorter hair that if you're going to stereotype, you would kind of guess where her politics might lie. Now, I am not somebody who likes to stereotype people or to stereotype ideas because personally I have been stereotyped throughout the years. I was a very creative individual as a young teenager. I shouldn't say young teenager. I didn't cut my hair until I was like 16. Okay, I cut my hair like once when I was younger because I wasn't combing my hair and it was like rat nested in there that I had to cut it. And then from that point onward, I made sure to take care of my hair and I never cut it until I was like 17. And then I started dyeing my hair and then I started doing all sorts of, it was like the floodgates where I just started experimenting. And I had some experimental looks as a teenager. That's good luck ever seeing that. Spiky hair, vampire makeup, bruh. I still get stereotyped, people guess which way I lean based on something that I say here or there, or just being a creative person, or the tone of my voice. Like, I get stereotyped a lot, and I always have, and my sister also has, and we are never what the stereotypes say we are. We still get treated that way. So like when I see stuff like this, where you're like, well, this person is kind of set up to be a perfect stereotype of what you would expect of them, and I go, I'm going to ignore all of that and give this a chance because that's what I do. And then the person fits into a perfect stereotype, and you're like, not only that, there are conversations surrounding this sort of thing that it's just like, there is so much out there at the moment that is talking about male writers and male readers and discrimination. And yet you can have open conversations with people who will say, yeah, most men are not interested in reading from women's, books by women, because there's this assumption. I even had somebody send me a video yesterday from the day that I'm recording this that was talking about the feminization of literature, and in the freaking thumbnail he had My Dark Vanessa right next to Come for Bigfoot, like CUM for Bigfoot. And I could not be more offended by this idea. Like, they look at these books that are just stuff they're not interested in, and they're going to put a book that is literally about a girl being groomed by her 40-year-old teacher as a 15-year-old, and what it looks like, and the outcome of it when she is 30. It's a very well-written book. That author had Stephen King as her mentor, as her crit partner. And you're going to put that next to literal erotica? I don't want to hear any of these people talk about caring about grooming if they're like that. You don't have to like this book. But to pretend that every book by a female is smut or is political man-hate is what we're running into here. And that's kind of one of the things that like just got me with the stereotypes is I don't like to stereotype people. I don't like to be stereotyped. However, as a female author, I get stereotyped all the time as just being female. Well, then you must write smut. Like your 2 options are smut writing, political man-hate writing, or smut and political man-hate writing. That's what you're assumed to read. That's what you're assumed to write. That's what everything that you do is assumed to be, as proof by My Dark Vanessa being put up there next to literal erotica. And it's all just dismissed. You're kind of considered a joke. And I had multiple people in the last couple of months consider me just a freaking joke. Why? Because male literature is more serious. And it's just a zeitgeist that's out there because, like, everybody deals with the zeitgeist of being dismissed. That's the whole reason why the male reader's situation is also being talked about, because it's just the perceptions. It's just there are people that think things out there. But I'm like looking at this and I'm in private conversations of people talking about, well, yeah, this is kind of what you would expect. This person is exactly what you would expect. And it's funny because last week I had that question about, do you judge people on stereotypes? And if you look at the comments, none of them kind of expect like a character stereotype or a person stereotype, but it's just like, this person is the embodiment of like why people are justified to not read female authors. Because I'm reading this and I'm so miserable reading it because this author, I mean, aside from the world building issues, she's falling into all of the stereotypes. I mean, at least we don't have smut in here, but you have this whole thing with the damsels. And this is what also got me. It's like, I'm trying to have a good time. I'm trying to read. I'm trying to disappear into this book, these characters, at least make your characters consistent in what they are. But we have this side tangent of just constantly belittling male authors in this book and having the female characters, like from the novels, we're going to get into it, the damsels, berate the male authors. However, the poorly written male characters are not the fault of the female authors. The poorly written male characters are also just bad because they're male. And I'm like, there is nothing fun for me about reading spite. I know that a lot of people love to read spite. I know a lot of people love to read angry fiction. I do not. And I don't like insulting fiction. And so then I'm sitting here and I'm having a bad time already. And I'm getting conversations in general about like how garbage it is and how stereotypical this person is and this constant. And then you've got this isn't fun because she's just mean. So what am I supposed to do with this? You know, everybody is right. This person is proving everybody who follows a stereotype correct. Because why would you give this person a chance if they're going to be exactly what you think they are? Why would you give anybody a chance if they're going to be exactly what you think they are? And so like that's what kind of a lot just threw me into the pit. A number of people being dismissive of me because not taking art seriously, who have been like assumingly placating me and just wanting to use me to affirm their beliefs. And when I disagreed with them in something, then it's bye-bye. It was really sad. And I know that not everybody is like that. I'm not trying to, I'm going on about stereotypes right now. I'm talking about specific interactions with people, specific conversations. And this wasn't even just men. There were females also saying, I'm skeptical of women writers. I'm not skeptical of male writers. And so it's a lot. And it makes you go, well, why do I even bother to write stories? Because I can't appeal to any audience because I don't write what is stereotypically desired to sell over here. I get maligned with it anyway, and nobody cares. And so like, you know, you got people saying that your soul, the whole reason that you exist, what you're trying to communicate for, I mean, what else do I have? And your storytelling doesn't matter. So I don't know. I find art to be extremely important. It's the way that we communicate. It's the way that we share our hearts with somebody else. When you experience somebody else's artwork, no matter the form, if it's something that really whether it's something that speaks to you or not, it becomes part of you. Even books that I haven't liked are still like inside of the makeup of like what I am. But the good art also inspires. Like you'll hear on Saturday a video I talked about Westies and like the inspiration of Westies and how inspired I've been by being around the creative people or by playing video games that have inspired storytelling. And so like good art, whether it is music, whether it is video games or movies or television or books, they inspire to create more communication, to create more stories, to express human experiences. And I find art to be incredibly important. And very meaningful. But then to have so many conversations with people where it's just like, oh yeah, art's basically a waste of time, all in the same time frame as this, where it's just like, yeah, communication from this sort of person is just like not worth it. And then it's just mean. Like then you get to the point. So this is also, I know that I'm all over the place. I am sorry that I'm scatterbrained. I should have written down the points I wanted to make with this, but then you get to the point that says, okay, so if I have to deal with garbage writing in male books, garbage writing in female books, what is there to even read? And it's not all books, okay? I don't want to sound like it's just, this was the Depression. I'm letting you know the full fledge of the Depression because there are excellent books. If you look at my Goodreads page, I have 5-star reads for men and women. There are incredible books. It was just a strong week of why bother because of so many things colliding at once. So fortunately, we're past that. We are going to talk about this story though. And you'll get the other 2 books. I'm currently reading the second book in this series because I try to give books the full arc, knowing that I write stories that take, you know, the whole time to develop the character because it does matter. I might do book 2 and book 3 in the same video though, because I want to devote 2 more videos to this book. But we're going to talk about the Library of the Unwritten. However, with all of that said, before we get into the book review, number 1, if you enjoy what I do here, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number 2, if you would like to be featured, check out the links down in the description below. The number 1 way to be featured is through Leigh, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, we bask in your creativity. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit it to the Fresh Meat feature, well, the first chapter, that first chapter will be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work. The third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, judge me. I hope you have a good time. I won't be surprised if you don't. No hard feelings, but they're available anywhere that you get books. With that said, let's get into this. Now, my final comments before jumping in. Number 1, I would have been happier if I stopped at 15% if this book had been left in the Library of the Unwritten. Number 2, this entire video is just my opinion. Nothing I say in this video is meant to be taken as arbitration of rules for what makes something good or bad or what anyone is allowed to do. No comments said about this book should be applied to other books or other situations either, as I am strictly talking about my experiences in reading this book, my thoughts about the subject, and why or why not things worked for me as a reader. Things that I dislike, others may like, and things that I like, others may dislike. That's the subjective nature of books, so please go into my thoughts and my stuff with that perspective in mind. And if the idea interests you itself, go read it for yourself. You may enjoy it much more than I have. With that said, I'm going to read you the first page for the vibes. Quote, "Stories want to change, and it's a librarian's job to preserve them. That's the natural order of things. The unwritten wing of the library, for all its infinite magic and mystery, is in some ways a futile project. No story, written or unwritten, is static. Left abandoned too long, and given the right stimulation, a book goes wrong in the head. It is the story's natural ambition to wake up and starts telling itself to the world. This, of course, is a buggered pain in the arse." So every chapter in this book starts with a blurb of rules or something that somebody learned about the library over the years, because obviously the Library of the Unwritten lives outside of time, it's in hell, and they've had different librarians over the centuries, so they've left their wisdom behind. And so that was how it started. Quote, "Books ran when they grew restless, when they grew unruly, and when they grew real. Regardless of the reason, when books ran, it was a librarian's duty to catch them. The twisty annex of Assyrian romances, full of jagged words and shadowed hearts broken on unforgiven clay tablets, had a tendency to turn around even experienced curators. The librarian, Claire, cornered the book there. The book had chosen to take the form as a character of a pale, coltish girl, and her breathing was nearly as ragged as Claire's was from the run. Claire forced her shaking hands still as she approached. The book was young, and so was its character. Back pressed into the bookcase, dandelion fluff hair fluttering around her thin shoulders, muddy jeans, superhero tee, a whimper like a dried reed. Please, I can't. I don't want to go back. Damn. Claire preferred them angry. Angry was simpler. The library has rules. Flicker of color swung around the corner. Her assistant, Brevity, skidded to a stop just short of the book. Her apple-round cheeks, usually a shade of robin's egg blue, were tinged with purple from the run. Seafoam green bangs puffed above her eyes, and she mumbled an apology as she handed Claire a slender bit of steel wrapped in cloth. Claire stowed the tool in her pocket, where it stayed there. Claire stored the tool in her pocket, where it would stay, she hoped. She considered the cowering figure in front of her. There were 2 parts to any unwritten book. Its words, the twisting, changing text on the page, and its story. Most of the time, the 2 parts were united in the books filling the unwritten wings stacks. But now and then, the books woke up, felt it had a purpose beyond words on a page, and then the story made itself into one of the characters and went walking. As the librarian of Hell's unwritten wing, Claire had the job of keeping stories on their pages. So the first thing that I want to mention is that the unwritten wing should have been in purgatory. Like, that makes much more sense. If people who have unfinished business go to purgatory, books that are unfinished should also go to purgatory. That makes so much more sense than being in hell for multiple reasons, which we'll get into. Going to the story, Claire and her assistant Brevity are chasing down this character, a little girl from a horror novel who is scared to return home because she knows what happens in the woods and what'll happen to her if she goes back. Claire isn't having it, telling her to get back in the frickin' book. And when she doesn't, when she begs and refuses, Claire takes the scalpel back out of her pocket, stabs the little girl, and then the little girl bleeds and then goes back into the book. Because what you learn is the two ways to get these characters back into the book is to get them to, one, either agree to go back in the book, or two, hurt them. And when they hurt, they bleed ink, and then they just basically teleport back into the book. Once the character is put away, Brevity says why she has come to Claire, and it was not to help Claire accost a child. It was because they have a visitor. A demon named Leto has brought a message for Claire, theoretically from the Great Deceiver. He says the demon is sweaty, anxious, burning the carpet, and smelly. His name is Leto, and he is a demon of entropy. He's come to inform Claire that one of her books is missing. It has escaped hell, and she needs to track it down before it hurts itself and the author, because damage is done to an author when they talk to their own book. The author is alive in America, which is apparently the land where free books go the most. I guess American books are just rowdy. Claire fills her skirt with way more scalpels than before. She's not going to use any of them, mind you, so weird. I feel like landing on a skirt of scalpels would be also weird, but she's got like basically cargo dresses, and it describes her as wearing multiple skirts, so she's got that going on. She shoos all of the demons and imps out of the library because while demons are interested in like licking the ink off of the pages so that they can consume human creativity for more power, they still enjoy hanging around the library and just like reading in their spare time, and Claire just lets them. Why? Leto is surprised at how well all of the demons just listen when they're told to get the frick out of the library because, well, demons don't usually listen well. And you would think that maybe we would have a description later as to like why the demons listen so well to her, but we also don't get that. They just do. In this case, they just do. Maybe it has to do with her being friends with freaking Andrus, but you know, that's us just making stuff up now. She gets the name of the author and the missing book from the demon, which happens to be, quote, author, McGowan, Amber Guinevere McGowan. Her foot stabbed at the wooden wall, and the ladder coasted a few feet down the row of drawers. McGowan, right. God, middle name Guinevere? What were her parents thinking? No wonder she never became a writer. Claire yanked the drawer open. Title? The missing title just says Nightfall. Leto looked up as Claire let out a snort. Something wrong? I think every writer, written or unwritten, has some glorified adventure titled Nightfall stuck in their head. Half of the residents here were a Nightfall at one point. Even unwritten stories eventually migrate to something more original. So, can you imagine how many of the same idea Claire has probably seen, though she's only worked here for 30 years, but that's still 30 years is still enough. With this information, she invites Brevity to come to Earth with her in order to collect the runaway. I don't know why she doesn't just leave Brevity to watch the library, because clearly somebody should be left behind to watch the library, you would think. They visit this demon named Walt. They also invite Leto to go with them for some reason. And again, why Leto? Plot reasons mostly. Like, if you think of his relationship with Claire, there is none. He's a demon, and she's just dragging this guy along with her to go to Earth to do her job, which is to collect a book, and now she is just leaving the library empty. Demons could go in there. Why don't they? They visit this demon named Walter, who seems to guard the gates and transportation, which allows them to get out. He opens with an abandon all hope, ye who go here spiel. After the niceties are exchanged, to which Leto is very surprised that the demon respects Claire like they do, she orders what they need, which are like little ghost lamps that'll get them to Seattle. We find out that Claire can't get there on her own as she is merely a human, and Brevity helps her get there, so that's the point of why Brevity gets to come. Quote, at Leto's blink, she gave a weak chuckle. You assumed a mere demon could make sense of the tangled, unfinished dreams of humanity? Not likely. It's too messy. Last demon assistant I had ran screaming after one full inventory. No, librarians are nearly always mortal and nearly always unwritten authors themselves. Brev here being an exception worked out by the Muse Corps. Leto thinks about how there are rumors of scandals with Claire's books trapped behind lock and key somewhere. Then we get, quote, right, he said, attempting to recover, rubbing the back of his neck and looking anywhere but at the stern woman. Shouldn't you be doing your time to get out of here? Isn't that the only reason mortals are here to, work through their... We all get the afterlife our soul requires. I've heard the sales pitches, Claire supplied with an impatient cluck of the tongue. This is mine. Lucky me. The trick they don't tell you is that the longer you're here, the harder it is to remember anywhere else. She paused as Walter lumbered slowly back out of the gloom. It's quite inconvenient, as are these questions. It's why boss needs a summons, Brevity said. Spirits and demons can come and go as they please, but mortals can't leave hell if their souls haven't freed them yet. But with a bit of ritual magic, library folk get a day pass. A day, and no more, Claire said. Not everyone gets access to a ghost light, but since it's part of the library's duties, King Cranky Pants has to make an exception. I don't like to use the word girl boss, but she is just girl bossing her way through everything. It's like, look, I am the exception. Brevity is the exception to the rules. I'm going to be able to get a ghost light to get out of here whenever I want. I am going to have all of the powers. I am going to have friends who are demons, even though there is no reason for demons to respect me or for me to trust them, but everything is an exception. Once everything is settled, they travel to Seattle where their runaway book is, and that's with bringing Leto with her because she strong-armed him into helping with this completion of this task as he was ordered to do. Like, all he was ordered to do was to bring her a message, and she has strong-armed him into coming with her. Now, all he was tasked to do was to bring her the message that she needed to go and get this book and what the name of the book was. She is the one that is like, well, why don't you come with us to Earth? And it's just like, why would you purposefully invite a demon to come with you to Earth on your mission, which should be the least intrusive way possible, you would think, because you just want to get out there, get the book, and get back to the library because that's where your duty is. And the longer your library is empty, like, is there a risk? If there's no risk, which I don't think that there is a risk of the library being empty, because nothing comes of the library being empty. So it already, from the get-go, it immediately destroys any tension that could be there, any risk that could be there. There really is none. Everything is just going to be convenient. And if you think anything is setting up for anything, it's not. Once they both get settled, Claire gives Leto his ghost light and tells him not to lose it because that's basically a calling card for the other side. On Earth, they also have appearances that have changed a little bit more to fit in so he doesn't look like a demon anymore. They get a cab and get their way to the place where the Unwritten character is, which is actually at a coffee shop where his author is sitting in there and they're chatting with one another. The demon is bothered by the fact that when they got into the cab and they had their job done, when they got into the cab and then were dropped off, Claire lied to the cabbie and didn't pay him and kind of just dazzled him so he didn't ask for money. Quote, "It didn't sit right with Leto. But we cheated him. It's a lie. A lie, a dream. Good stories are both," Claire dismissed. "Is it so bad? He'll remember the story, turn it over carefully in the back of his mind, feel the edges of it like he would a lucky coin. A story will change him if he lets it. The shape and the spirit of it. Change how he acts, what dreams he chooses to believe in. We all need our stories. I just fed him a good one. But he's got to pay the bills. His tally will come up wrong. The money. It doesn't do no harm." Brevity nudged Leto. "Besides, don't get boss started. If there's one thing librarians know, it's stories." So, like, she just told him a story, and that was his payment. So it sounds like she, just dazzled him, and then he walked away, and it was like, they start walking up the street, looking for signals of where the missing character would be, and then finding him in a coffee shop with a woman. Quote, "Leto followed the girl's finger to a table by the window where a young and attractive couple perched. The woman sipped at a tall glass while she flicked animated, slender hands around in conversation with what Leto assumed from the smitten look on the man's face was her boyfriend. He was a composition of fine tailoring and good genes. He leaned conspiratorially over the table and offered the woman a practiced smile. The man's fingertips rested artfully at his temple, where bronze hair ruffled a non-existent breeze. Leto was no judge of such things for many reasons, but even he could tell in the moment that the hero was, frankly, perfect. Now, I thought that this was a great description for this character, for this book especially. I thought that this was an excellent description for this book, for this character, especially a love interest of some kind. We're going to find out later that this is a villain. Also perfectly fine description for a villain because of how many haughty villains there are. Claire is so not happy about the book talking to the author, which has been confirmed with the author's picture in the book. Leto is confused at the scene that he's looking at because the man does not look like a book. Quote, "Wait, I thought that we were here for a book," Leto said. We are. He is the book. Claire's explanation was peevish as she scanned the shop. When unwritten books get wild, too loved, or just too hungry, they get in their fool heads to be real. They leak into the world, usually in the form of one of their characters. They aren't the most creative lot on their own. That guy is obviously the hero. Did you see those cheekbones? All he's missing is a sword and a white horse. That's our character, violating every rule unwritten works have. When I get that book back in the wing, bugger, why'd it have to be a hero? Oh, what's wrong with heroes? Everything. A boss ain't exactly fond of characters that decide to wake up, especially heroes. A thoughtful look flickered across Brevity's face. He's just a representation of the story, of course. The physical book still exists. He can't stray too far from the rest of the book, so it must be close. Claire orders Brevity and Leto to cause a distraction while she attempts to get Mr. Nightfall away from the author. Now we're going to switch perspectives. So not only do we have the hunting of the book down, which is how it should have stayed. This entire other perspective is so unnecessary and starts the downfall of this book, honestly. We switch over to Ramil, who is an angel in heaven. And he is guarding heaven's gates, not because they need to be guarded, but because he was part of Lucifer's uprising, cast out as a fallen angel, and is trying to redeem himself. And so in order to redeem himself, he was given the punishment of being the border guard for heaven, even though it doesn't need one, and then asking people as they come in if they have like final prophecies, dreams, whatever that they want to leave behind. Well, as he's standing there, this guy walks up and he's like, do you have anything that you would like to leave behind? And the guy pulls out a piece of paper from his jacket, and Ramil's like, what the frick? How do you have a piece of paper? That shouldn't be here. And he takes the piece of paper, and the guy is like, I got it from the devil. I got it from the devil. I did a ritual and I stole it. Because we're going to, I mean, that's not exactly it, but that is it. He doesn't say that exactly now, but he will. Anyway, Ramil takes that piece of paper to his superior, Uriel, who looks at it and says, that is a piece of the devil's codex. That is a piece of the devil's writing project. And it's a lost page. It is a lost book, and we need to find where the other pages are because that book has been missing for a very long time. It is a dangerous book. Ramil, if you can get all of the pages of this book, you can be redeemed and come back home to heaven. Like, you don't have to do border security anymore. You are welcome back. So now we've got the introduction of these angels chasing down the devil's book, which currently I'm halfway through book 2. Devil's book has absolutely nothing to do with the next book, so this is just a MacGyver that exists in this book. Also, Leto doesn't exist in the next book. It's so dumb. He is such a forced character. Leto could have been such an opportunity to help Claire not be such a bad person because he's a teenager. He is a teenager who killed himself, and Claire is obviously somebody who lacks any sort of compassion whatsoever. And so since she can't just like stab him and send him back into a book, he could have been the reason that she had to learn to be more patient, to learn to be more compassionate, to open her heart. Like, I'm so sad that her character wasn't more than that, especially with where Leto goes. I'm getting way ahead of myself, and I'm sorry about that because I just want to get these thoughts out before I forget them. So there's going to be a point later where Leto basically kills himself again as a spirit so that the other guys can move forward with what they need to do. And he also kills himself because he doesn't think that he deserves to be loved or whatever. He thinks that he is just a complete burden. And so he goes and feeds himself to the Egyptian gator, and then the bridge comes up and they can leave. Now, if Claire had taken on a sort of like mommy role, or at least a big sister role, okay, where she's a little bit more compassionate and she started showing Leto what love and maybe care looks like, even if not love, but just like somebody that cares about him, somebody that makes him feel like he's worth something. And so then his sacrifice wasn't just in self-hate, but it was actually an appreciation for what she had shown him that he didn't feel like he deserved. It could have shown growth on both of their sides. After we've gotten Ramil and the codex pages introduced, we're back over to Leto and Brevity in the coffee shop as they are making a scene, and they're acting out like a breakup, but Leto is like really awkward. And then instead of doing this breakup, they make up. He doesn't know what he's doing. You would think with him being the type of person that he was, or is introduced to be later on, this scene would have been way more awkward and not helpful to him. But they do just fine. They distract. Hero goes running to try to get away from what's happening, and then Claire confronts Hero in a dark alley. Expect her to have a trench coat. She pulls it open. She's got guns that are actually just, I mean, they're like lighters, but they've got scalpels at the end because she just stabs. And she goes, quote, "And I have no intentions of letting you hang around here torturing that poor girl," Claire said. "The difference is I have a say in the matter, and you do not." "I'm not torturing her," the hero straightened. She's so, but never harm her." Claire gave an impatient wiggle of her finger. "She's amazing. She's brilliant. She's creative and thoughtful and clever and kind. That the gist of it?" "Well, yes." The hero's face softened. "You see it. She's perfect. At first, I just wanted to meet her, but now we've spent days just talking, and if I can just inspire her to..." "She's your author. Inspiring her to write is not your job. You've already caused enough damage. I have been a perfect gentleman." You know, knowing that he is a villain and that he just wants to see his story told and that he actually cares about his author in these early pages is actually endearing. And this is what I really liked about the story. Like, this is when I still liked it, and I loved the relationship between the creation and the author, because like, we still got a couple parts of this that I'm like, I was still into this. Okay, even with the way that Ramil was introduced. Ramil is the plot B that just, I don't know why it needed to happen. It just ruined the story. Sorry, it's upsetting. But like, we're still in the parts that I enjoy, where it's like you get to meet the character and the author talking to each other, and the character wanting to know more about like where they came from or how they were inspired, and the adoration that they have for the person that created them, and just like wanting to be around them. That made so much sense to me also as a writer, and also as the kind of writer that I am, which is more of like the vibes writer. I'm not super much a plotter. I know you'll listen to me talk about Westies and be like, "But look, you plotted parts out." I vibed out the stuff and then I wrote down where I knew I wanted it to go. I didn't deliberately plot it, but that's a different thing entirely. But I actually really liked the way that it introduced the characters in the books. And then like later on, when it says how and why authors can't be around their characters. Eventually, the hero relents and says that he will go back and he will do it without fighting. He'll bring the book back that he stole, but he does want to say goodbye to his author while he gets the book. Claire eventually agrees, but not without stamping his hand first, so that he now has like this blood stamp that he is forever attached to the library's special collection. What that really means, I don't really know. It's not really used. It's just a way to like tie him to Claire so that she knows where he is at all times. But any larger ramifications, I don't think are ever really brought up. Leo, Claire, and Brevity then wait outside of the coffee shop as Hero speaks to the author. They're pretty much looking different directions to give him privacy, which is kind of dumb. If they hadn't been looking in different directions, they may have seen him rip out the first 5 pages of his book and then hand them to the author. But instead, they're just like talking to each other outside the window, giving Hero the privacy that he needs. Leto is asking what kind of damage a character can do to an author, and you get, quote, "Claire didn't turn her attention away from the couple in the window. She drew in a long breath. Books don't appear as normal people to their authors. Characters are made of something more to the one who created them. They're made of our dreams, our scars, slivers stuck beneath our skin. You're not meant to meet someone like that. She doesn't know it yet, but she's talking to the most alive person that she'll ever meet. The kind of alive that you don't find in real life. No one. No great love or her own flesh and blood will ever come close. She'll remember that glint in his eyes, the twist of his chin, a casual turn of phrase. She will hold it quietly in her mind like a fire that will consume everything. If she's lucky, she'll walk away haunted, but if she's unlucky, she'll believe it. She won't write him. She'll spend her whole life looking for him." Claire's knuckles were white on her lap. "If she's smart, she'll try to forget, but that brand of memory is always going to be there, seared into the tender curve of her heart, a breath caught in her chest. It kills you eventually." Like, I really love this idea that a character in a book is going to understand you better than anybody else in the world ever. And I know that different people obviously write very different types of characters, and some of them are just like diabolical. Obviously, we're not teleporting the most diabolical character out of a book, but I am personally of the belief that everything in your book does have some sort of grounding in you. It's not necessarily a one for one, so don't take it that way either. But like, you can't write something that isn't part of like the way that you see things. I'm talking, let's see, how do I want to say that? Your book does represent you in a bigger way. So a lot of my books, let's see if I can describe this using my books. All of my books generally have an aspect of alienation and isolation in them. You know, Joey feels isolated and alienated because of her family situation. You have the Cassidy kids that are in a situation of isolation because their father was murdered and now they are running from the demons of what was his past. In Dead End Drive, it's all about isolation because it's actually just in a mansion in the middle of a nowhere. And even with Boom Boom Boom, you have Jan, who lives in Ukraine, his family doesn't really get what he's doing. His best friend doesn't really get what he's doing, even though he tries really hard and he loves them and they love him. He doesn't really feel like anybody understands his dreams, and that's okay. But in all of the stories, there is some aspect of people feeling alienated. There is also a family aspect in every single one of my books. It is so important that you see, and it's found family most often. No, it's just family. I'm gonna say just family. And it's different flavors of family. Like in Dead End Drive, you have Agatha who adopts Kelly, and then it is Gavin and Anna who then adopt Kelly when Agatha is dead. That's not a spoiler. The book opens with Agatha dead. In Boom Boom Boom, you have Jan's whole motivation is to make his parents happy, to make his parents proud, to take care of his parents, so his dad doesn't have to go and kill himself in the mine anymore. And in Bodymore, you have Joey's motivation. A lot of what's holding her back is the relationship between her parents and how it affects her. And then she finds family in the people around her with Jag and Donnie and Wayland, and learning to trust other people. So she's building that family, the found family in that one. And the same is with Ralph and Casey, is Ralph has never wanted anything more than a family, and Casey's family fell apart because of the stuff that happened with Casey, and then they found each other. And even against, Casey's desires, they eventually became a family, and he understood the importance of family. And then with The Legend of Bill Cassidy, all of those characters, the main Cassidy characters, they are a family unit, and they eventually expand their family. And the thing that drives Tommy is he wants a family. He wants to do what his dad did, and his dad wanted a family. That's why his dad got out of being an outlaw. And then if you look even at a Predisposed to Bliss, which is on the back burner, that is also about Isabella's relationships with her family, especially, and the isolation she feels in her family. If you look at Cain and Abel, that's about his relationship with his parents and the alienation he feels and how that comes out between him and his brother. Point being, like, you see these elements consistently in my work because it's part of like how I think and how I feel and how I see. And you also see a lot of this like compassion, and you're going to have broken people that are going through things in this attempt to understand people. And like, nobody is perfect. Joey struggle, Casey struggle, like people struggle. You have to love Jan. He just is. But you see a lot of these same things, and you always see hope in the end, and you always see family in the end. And in all of my works, you also see how it is that family unit, whatever it looks like, it is the family coming together, and the family that actually cares about one another, that creates security, that creates success, that creates healing, that creates anything. So all of my stories have to do with love, and it can be friendship love, familial love, romantic love, but they are about love, and they are about isolation, and they are about family dynamics and how parents and family influence their kids. So you see that sort of thing, and I couldn't write those things without having an interest in those things. Now, there are smaller things that you might find in fiction that are not representative of the characters, but the overall, if you're looking at themes, the themes come from the author subconsciously, most often, putting those things in there as they write their characters. I mean, I'm going to say mine are all subconscious, and then I can recognize them after the fact, because there is a fingerprint that it comes from your soul and then goes into the stories. And you make characters that come from like the way you create things and the way you see things. And it's super obvious to me because I can look at characters Sam and I have made together and how he's got a signature for characters and I've got a signature for characters. Monty has a signature for characters that is different than my signature for characters, and not just in the looks, but in the personality and the elements that we include. And so I love this idea. Getting back to this book now that I have ranted, I love this idea that a character or a manifestation of your book in the form of a character is going to be the person that you meet in your life who understands you more than anybody else. And it is so different. It is next level because what you're doing is looking into your own soul without realizing that you're looking into your own soul. Like that is an unreal connection. And I love just how dangerous that can be, like describing it as dangerous, because nobody is ever going to get you like that. And you can become obsessed with looking for that person to the point that you no longer write that story because you're just looking for this person that doesn't exist because they are inside of you. That is the thing that you want to communicate. That is your soul. I love that. And that's one of the reasons why I started recommending this book to other people, because I'm like, I get this and I get the danger and I get that this is hopefully going to be a story about how to re-inspire this girl after she has become obsessed with meeting this person who is a part of her. Like, I thought this was going to be about the inspiration of character and how characters and books relate to people and communicate. And like, there are so many ways that you could take this. This is pretty much getting to the end of like the stuff that I liked, but I was so into it at this point. And because we're going to get like so critical as we keep going, I feel like I need to let you know that this is where I was like, I get it. And I could probably put into more words as to why I liked it, but I was like, I get it. This feels like a love letter to creativity. Now, the longer we go on, less of a love letter to creativity, more of a glazing section of librarians, because now apparently librarians are the ones that are in charge of all of the stories and are the only reasons why stories get told. And also stories are not connected to their creators anymore because stories exist outside of time. So no longer can these stories be part of the human soul. And by outside of time, I mean, we're going to learn at some point later in this story that stories existed before the person who is the writer existed. And so now they can't be part of the soul. So we'll get there. Eventually, Hero comes out of the coffee shop and meets up again. Claire challenges him that he took too long and he better not have told the author anything about what he is. He says that he didn't, but he did give her a hint. Hero, I'm going to say you're not that smart, because you could have gotten out of this without having Claire's wrath on you if you just didn't say anything. Though I know that he's kind of arrogant. This leads to Claire learning that Hero gave the author a couple pages of the book in an attempt to inspire her. Now, why she didn't think that those were just like printed pages somewhere, Claire and them were just standing outside the coffee shop watching. How Claire didn't notice that he was doing that when he was doing that, I'm not entirely sure, but quote, "It's cruel. You say it's cruel to visit my author where I am unwritten, but I find it monstrous how you allow these authors to suffer, and yes, allow their stories to suffer as well, to live these half-lives, stories and authors wearing holes in their souls that hold the shadow of the other worlds they'll never see, when you could so easily help them. Ask your muse here." The hero sank more heavily against the brick. "One word, one hint, one familiar face in a coffee shop. If I can inspire her to write and make us real, you should be freeing your entire library, introducing books to their authors, not jailing them. If it gets them to write and gives worlds a chance to live." He made a guttural sound in his throat. "Who are you to stop them? Or must every author fail so that they can be just as miserable as you?" See, and I still like this because this could have been the plot of the story. It could have been Claire getting over her resentment because she was a failure of an author. Obviously, has already been brought up like 2 times. And yeah, she's just shoving these books heartlessly, these characters, back into their thing and shoving them back on the wall instead of trying to empty out the library of the Unwritten, which is really what she should want. You should want fewer books in the library of the Unwritten because that would mean more books are being completed and then being sent out into the world to create, to inspire. We could have had the entire story being about that. And Claire getting over herself, or Claire forgiving herself for the failures of herself, and then letting her books out of the dingy dark, wherever that she put them. We're never going to get to that, though, like where these rumors were that Leto was talking about, so that just feels like a red herring that was created. I don't know, but it's not important. Shortly after all of this, Hero goes paler and paler, feeling hot. Claire surmises that the author is burning the pages right now, and after all he did was break up with her. So again, this would have launched perfectly into a plot line of how to re-inspire this author after that just happened, because his story needs to not be unwritten. Switching over to Ramil. Ramil goes to the dead man's house to look for signs of where the man had gotten the demon pages, and if a demon had been in his house. He doesn't know why people mess with Lucifer, because Lucifer is like really scary and worse than people's depictions of him. Ramil eventually believes that demons may have already stopped by here and decided that he's going to wait and watch for any demon movement in the city. BT dubs, this city would be called Seattle. Switching over to Leto's perspective again, Claire orders Brevity to take the book and Hero back to hell ahead of them as she and Leto stay behind to do something else. After Brevity leaves, Claire leads the way to the pier, and it's during this time that we learn that not only did Leto used to be human, but also when you die, you receive a sort of punishment that you believe your soul deserves in order to seek redemption or repentance for the crimes that you believe you've committed or for the crimes that you did commit. That's how Claire ended up as the librarian of the Unwritten, and why Leto looks like a demon, because that's how he thinks of himself. Another part of his punishment is the amnesia he faces, where he doesn't really remember his life himself, hardly remembers even his life in hell. During his punishment there, it is all just kind of a blur. While at the pier, it seems that Claire is hunting for pages of something, or the Devil's Code. It sounds like she's looking for something, because it belongs in Hell's library. So she may be sensing the demon pages that are being held by Ramil, and that's why she ended up there. She and Leto are then confronted by a man in a trench coat that barely covers his wings, and it turns out to be Ramil. He notices the demon walking around and is demanding answers for what they're doing there. When he finds that Claire is a librarian, he demands that she give him the book. Claire is confused what business this watcher, as she calls him, would have with a random book by a random woman in Seattle, because he's not very clear about what book he's looking for, and so she thinks that he is demanding Hero. He pulls the page of the codex out of his jacket to be like, this book, you idiot, this is the book that I want. And during a confrontation, Leto grabs the page from Ramil, and then the two of them end up falling into the pier, and then they teleport away. There wasn't a whole lot of foresight on Ramil's part to pull out that page to then put it in the hands of the librarian from hell, but I digress. You were probably put at the gate of heaven for everybody's own good, because this was a yikes decision to me. Claire is confused as to why that angel/watcher would want anything to do with some random hero from a romance novel by some random girl in Seattle, and now, since he is damaged, she needs to get the work to put him back together to hopefully get some answers, because for some reason she thinks that missing those first 5 pages is going to heavily affect what he knows. Now, you would think that there would be some sort of ramifications of his burning those first 5 pages, but there really are no character ramifications of those 5 pages. He still knows his story. I mean, the only ramification is he is rejected from the story, but it's also, if you think about it, so number 2, I know we're starting on number 2, he's the villain. So if the first couple of pages contained him, then it was likely that those pages were a prologue. So his story really wouldn't be that affected by deleting the prologue. And I know everybody who's in the chat is like, but hear me out. You can tell a story without a prologue. Not saying that your prologue is not important, but also, I don't think deleting the first 5 pages of your prologue is enough to reject a character from a book who is going to be important later on in the book, especially if they're not the main character. Now, here we're told she thinks the page that she got from Ramil belongs to Hero, so that's going to be part of trying to repair the book, as she also tries to put other pages in. Now, where the text on those other pages that she's trying to fill in comes from, I'm not sure, but we get, quote, "A book in the unwritten wing is a manifest potential of a story. The words are the thing. Potential cannot be ripped out and replaced like parchment or leather. You cannot substitute your own words. A story must be fed, encouraged to grow its own roots. Keep the book from damage, Gregor. Repair those you can save, and beware of the stories to find their freedom." You would think that a book would take damage if, the author gave up on it, or the author obviously started destroying it, and there's nothing you can do but inspire the author to pick it up again, because books are magically tied to the soul of the author who is creating them, or then a soul of an author who picked them up afterwards. But No, she is literally mending them. It's why she has scalpels. Quote, she breathed every curse she knew under her breath as she stitched blank pages into the wounded front pages, carefully tying the savaged front matter together with tiny red binding threads. The new pages were strong, but it still might all be for nothing if it didn't restore the story. She'd spent the last 2 hours trying to coax the words, first with soft assurances and then, finally, with a blunt end of her quill, nudging a trembling text to repopulate the blank pages. But they wouldn't budge. The best that she'd been able to do was convince some pointless footnotes to spread to the heading in the first page. The rest of the replacement pages remained infuriatingly blank, their text lost forever, which is going to leave the hero in a predicament. Stories needed a beginning to make sense. Claire had to restore the book if he was going to go back to where he belonged. You would think that restoring the book would literally have to do with just the author. Like, I know that this is thinking far too literally for a magic book, but also we're talking about literal manifestation of somebody's creativity appearing. And you would think, so I've had situations where something that I'd worked on was deleted, was unsaved, like hours of work just gone, was lost, and all I had was the remembrance of like the idea that I had written, but I don't have the pages anymore to revise, and so I'd have to rewrite it. And like that'll I'm sure, I am positively sure more than one of us writers have run into a situation where we did not save and or we lost data because we lost a connection somewhere and this it's gone. Or, you know, in olden days, or if you do the olden way, fires. Somebody threw your pages in the fire and they were gone forever and you had to rewrite them. There are many ways. But so you would think it doesn't mean that your story is never going to be rewritten. You just go and inspire to write those things. Now, it can be super demotivating if you lose all of this work and you're like, and yeah, it sucks to do it again. But also, it's usually better the second time you do it. Let's be real. But so you would think that her repairing the book would have to do with making sure that the author writes those pages again to give the character a chance to live. But none of this book repair has anything to do with the author who was originally writing the book, which makes it a very strange thing that like the conceptualization or the eventual creation of these books have literally nothing to do with the authors after spending the entirety of the intro of this book saying how important the authors are to the production of the books. Like it goes off in such a strange direction where this author never matters anymore. It all comes down to Claire, but it's not Claire's idea. It's not Claire's book. So how can Claire even pretend that she can fix a book that has nothing to do with her, that's not from her soul, not from her creation, not from her muses? I was going to say musement, but then I was like, that sounds too much like a real word. As she's attempting to fix Hero's book, she tries to put the pages in that she got from Ramil, but it won't budge. The book will not accept them. And as she messes with it, she gets these visions of destruction that assure her these pages don't belong to this book, and they aren't part of Hero. This is something else. The angel was after something else, but what exactly is it? The angel said that it belonged in hell, but it didn't look like anything she had ever seen in her life, and yet hell also had no books of its own. So what the heck was this guy talking about? Interrupting the investigation is Hero as he awakens. Claire informs him that he needs to remind the story he's from the beginning of, since those pages are now missing and she hasn't been able to find them again. The hero tries to merge with his book. The story has decided he doesn't belong there anymore after the interactions with his author. He is in the state of shock that his story won't have him. He sits down and is sort of out of it. Looks like the library just got a new assistant. And isn't that and since Hero is in a special collection, thanks to the seal that was given to him on Earth, Claire gives Brevity the assignment to watch over Hero while she goes over to the Arcanist wing about the pages that she's got to see if that guy over there knows anything about it. Because the Arcanist wing is a place where a demon curates all of these magical artifacts of the arcane. And so maybe these pages are less book and more arcane artifact. Switch to Leto's POV, quote, I know scavengers when I hear them. The unwritten wing holds a delicate balance in hell, neither vessel to nor clearly apart. It's the nature of books that keep us here. It's the nature of books that the devil wants. They want anything that tastes of mortal mind. An unwritten book is nothing but pure potential, and a soul's potential is just power down here. Power, naturally, is all the creatures of hell care about. They descend on the shelves like a swarm of locusts if we'd let them. So you'd think that this would mean, hey, maybe don't leave the library unattended. Maybe the demons shouldn't be left alone in the library to lick books while your back is turned helping somebody else. You'd think that there would be some kind of risk. There's not. So it kind of builds these things to say they matter, but they don't. Leto is going with Claire to talk to the Arcanist because she's asked him to help her for some reason. She says the librarians are allied with the Arcanist to protect the magical things of the world from pretty much everything else. Quote, the question made Claire slow. Leto had to careen into a pillar to avoid running into her. Claire seemed to consider before giving him a serious answer. Against everything, as long as there have been places like libraries, places attempting to preserve and curate, there have been forces attempting to acquire. The library makes for a juicy target for the demons of hell, even though they're supposedly our hosts. That made no sense. But they're just books, he blurted before he could worry about insulting the librarian. Claire didn't seem prone to taking offense. She just chuckled. It was a dry, crackling laugh that made her sound older than she looked. They may be just books to you, Leto, but these are unwritten books, pure potential. They're the stuff of something demons don't have, imagination. That's the stuff of humans. The power to create. Down here, that's a decisive power. There are factions here in hell that would love nothing more than to eat the books whole. For a momentary burst of power, if the arcane wing and the library didn't work together to present a united front, the books would have been burned long ago. Why would they be burned and not consumed? What about the arcane wing actually helps protect the library more than anything else? Because I don't see anything between these two. Like, even reading into the second book where now Claire is in the arcane wing and Brevity is in the library, they're not really communicating because Claire is hurt that she is no longer the librarian and she was kicked out. So they're supposed to present a united front in order to stop the demons. And if anything, I would assume that it was Duke of Hell Andris who was stopping the demons with the united front. But we never actually get like how this partnership does anything. It's just kind of mentioned. Considering that it would be so desired to consume all of this human potential, I also have to ask why in the heck this library is being stored in hell. It seems like the biggest liability there is. Maybe put it in limbo or something. Like, I can actually see the logic of putting stories of the untold heroes in Valhalla, which is what we're told, but I fail to understand the logic of putting unwritten books in hell when it's literally a glutton's paradise of power. And imagination is something that demons lack. I could have actually believed that unwritten books were in hell because it's a cruel fate for a book to have, never being told, never being seen, just barely existing somewhere in the universe because it was thought up but never pursued. But it's also just such a strange thing to house powerful artifacts like the arcane and unwritten books in a place that would consider them basically power-ups to be consumed at any given point if given the opportunity. And I'm not sure I understand why a demon is the one in charge of the arcane junk drawer, when you would think that the arcane junk drawer would be just as much a liability to demons like consuming stuff. Like, you wouldn't put Gale in charge of the arcane magic drawer, junk drawer, because he'd just sit there eating all of the freaking enchanted weapons. Now enter Andres the Demon, who cares for the arcane wing. He looks at the pages of the Codex Gigas, or the Devil's Book, and says, quote, no proper demon would bother with a trivial deal such as that, Andres shrugged, but there was a book created, and Lucifer's claims ownership himself. Claire frowned. Lucifer wrote a book? Impossible. Demons don't create book. They don't write book. Andres held up a finger. His voice took on a teaching tone. This wasn't a story, it was an artifact. A container. It takes a lot of power to hold a realm like hell as long as Lucifer has. Power burns out a god as much as a mortal. The oldest being has been known to siphon off bits of themselves over the years, selves here and there, to remain sane, to hedge their bets. The more innocuous the piece, the better. Andres made a vague gesture to the curious around them. Something like that should be here, by all right, but I suppose he didn't trust my predecessors with it. Rather insulting that he thought Earth was safer. Who's to say that he left them on Earth and they weren't stolen? But also, can't say that I'm all that surprised that Lucifer, the Great Deceiver, would not trust other demons. I think he knows a little thing or two about deception, I'm just gonna say. So Claire asks why she hasn't been aware of this book before, and Andres answers, quote, "Why would you be? It's a perfectly written book, not one of your delicate unwritten things. As I understand it, the book was retrieved during a mortal uprising. A fire made a convenient cover. Our agents replaced it with a harmless, mundane copy in the chaos. It disappeared after that. Who knows what our benevolent dictator did with it? Well, yes, there might have been complications. They replaced the book as it was, but humans say that precisely 10 pages might have gone missing in the fire. We thought that it was just a replica that was damaged. Precisely 10 pages went missing? Who is out there like, was it specific pages or was it all pages from the same clump? That's the true question. Lucifer ordered that nobody be told about these missing pages, and thus no one did. This also took place before Andres was the Arcanist, and says that if anyone covered it up, it would have been the previous librarian. I'm not entirely sure why that would make sense, since we were just told that it was an artifact and it would not have been housed in the library but in the arcane, but also that it went missing well before Andres came. So like, why would the librarian know? The librarian is a human. The librarian is always a human, not a demon. Why would Lucifer talk to a human about freaking anything in this regard? Unless it's just a suggestion that librarians can BS pages and arcanists can't. But Claire starts summoning Lucifer to get to the bottom of this, and Andres stops her, saying that if Lucy knows that his book is in the hands of angels and angels are looking for it, then a war could break out. And it would be used as evidence for how both of them are incompetent and humans shouldn't run the library. This is not a new day. I did not change outfits. I did not record video for 30 minutes without sound and come back the next day. Don't worry about it. So anyway, I wouldn't figure that Lucifer had any control over the library or the library staff, considering how desirable the contents of the library are themselves to demons. And like, if regular demons can consume human creativity and are jealous of human creativity, wouldn't you think that, you know, Lord of the Pride and the King of the Fall and the hater of humanity because he had God's adoration in a way that he did not have, do you think that he might want to consume human creativity a little bit? Because then, if he's in control of the library, might as well be Golden Corral, or rather Golden Halal. I don't know if that works. Point being, the more information we get about this world building, the more questionable it gets. Andres continues, quote, "Do you see now why reporting this is foolhardy?" Leto saw Claire's chin rise almost imperceptibly, the stubborn steel that he'd begun to recognize as the librarian's will coming to bear. To the courts, perhaps, but if we approach this as a private matter with him, the purge. Claire stopped. That was an entirely different scenario. The what? Leto felt his confusion had reached a breaking point. A tragedy in Hell's history. Claire scowled at Andres. A fool librarian challenged Lucifer for dominion of the library, tried to claim independence and lost. Well, the books were preserved, but the entire library was remade and sealed. It spurred a line of book burnings on Earth. If you've ever heard of the Library of Alexandria, she was born of that time. I suppose that he wanted to punish her where it hurt. The muses were in an uproar. It was chaos until the library had a proper librarian again. Tragic, but beside the point, because we are not challenging anyone. Now, number one, this doesn't really make sense, and it's a kind of a throwback to me to the Cyborg Tinkerer, where there was this uprising of the bourgeoisie against the dictator, and instead of killing all of these rich people that were openly treasonous against the powers that be, the powers that be just killed all of their servants and then were like, don't do that again. And so here again, we have the people that caused the uproar, but they're not the ones being put, like, we locked the library and killed people, but the books are fine. Also, this proves that Lucifer has the control of the library. So why is he not just feeding all of the demons in order to make them stronger so that he can win the war against the angels? Like, I don't even know what this war is about, other than just a vague sense of like heaven and hell are at war because that's how it is. If you look at the Bible or any theological background of some kind, there is more reason to it other than war exists in black and white, but this is also giving me a throwback to Crow Caller's books that also had war arbitrarily happening between heaven and hell, while they were also sending demons and angels to the exact same school to be trained to then go to war with each other later. It just feels like a lack of interest and a lack of investment in literally the elements the author chose to put in here, and partially because maybe they just don't like the source material from having, background religious trauma or whatever. But if you're that against something, maybe don't put it in your book. Because this is not good world building. This is not entertaining. This is like a bare minimum. And you're going, well, I know this thing vaguely, so I guess I can write about it, but then you hate it so much that you're not doing anything for it. Like, try picking subject matter that you like, that are enjoyable to write, that are enjoyable to explore and research, because this ain't it. Not telling authors what to do, I'm just saying this is not an enjoyable experience for me. Anyway, I can't help but wonder if the demons can literally just take over the library at any given time, and then I have no idea why Claire commands any respect at all from any of the demon, because like she obviously walked into the library and said, hey everybody, get out, I'm leaving, don't come in here, and then locked the doors, and they all just respected it. And she goes to Walter, and Walter, who is the gatekeeper of traveling dimensions, was also just like, oh yeah, Claire, whatever you need, just let me know. And he really likes her, and Leto was like, what the frick, why does he like her? And we have no reason for why Claire commands such respect from all these demons, when you would at least think that they see her as somebody stopping them from getting the nummy meals of creativity that they so want to consume. Like, this is a way of writing a story with zero stakes, and pretend like it's not even pretending there are stakes. I mean, it pretended there were stakes earlier when it was like humans get wrecked by interacting with their creatures, but there are no stakes to anything in the story. The longer this goes on, we're just getting a bigger question. Andres says that he is going to go look for the missing pages along with Claire and Leto. The place to start would be where the last librarian is, and that would be Bjorn. Bjorn has chosen, now that he has done his time in hell, to go over to Valhalla, so they're all gonna have to go to Valhalla. I'm just now questioning how demons and punished individuals can literally come and go from all of the afterworld realms as they please if they're supposed to be stuck in punishment doing penance until they are free. But that's never going to be addressed. Leto and Claire walk away talking about Andres being an old Duke of Hell, one that was Lucifer's right-hand man until he got ousted in political games and retired to the arcane junk drawer. I don't know how you just get to retire from top-level politics to the keeper of the magical junk drawer. I don't really think that's much of a downgrade, and it feels like it would very much be a desired place to be. I mean, can you imagine Gale just getting to live in the freaking magical junk drawer with all of the enchanted items that he can just snack on at any hour of the day when his soul feels the need to consume magical items? Claire also says, quote, yes, aren't you a fast learner? In any case, Andres survived, but withdrew from the courts to lick his wounds. He eventually took over the role of curator for the arcane wing. He's a demon, yes, but retired from the court. He's always been a supporter of the library. He helped me out a good deal when I was new to the library. He taught me a lot. I would be a little bit suspicious of a demon who is a patron of the library, considering the relationship between demons and the library, as has been stated. And also, very dumb on Claire to just trust a demon who was ousted from politics, definitely not setting up to be used by anybody for any means to get back into power. I don't think you just get ousted as the right-hand man and then just go, you know what? Yes, I do choose to retire. Even Dalen the Conqueror did not just retire when he was ousted from politics. He waited until he could become 17 again and then started taking over again with his new 17-year-old fate. Leto insists on going with Claire to help her because he doesn't remember anything else, doesn't know what else to do with his life, and would rather be near her than sitting anywhere waiting for his next commands to come in. Claire agrees to take him with her. Returning to Ramil's POV, he has gone to Uriel to report what happened with the librarian at the pier. Uriel says that the girl must be stopped, taken down, and the book taken from her. She's not allowed to have that demon book. They need the demon book because it will be bad bad time if that book falls into the hand of Lucifer. Uriel immediately also damns the souls, quote, she serves hell. She is already damned. If the librarian seeks salvation, then heaven's justice will purify. So who exactly is heaven for? I had this question throughout because it describes heaven as having no creativity, and then you've got this guy who is doing demonic rituals, who is standing at the gates with his demon paper, and like, I don't know who goes there. And then in book 2, guys, I just got to a portion in book 2 that said like all of the interesting people are in hell. And so like, who is even in freaking heaven in this story? Who wants to go to heaven? Who gets chosen to go to heaven? Does anybody get chosen to go to heaven? Is heaven just like the gated community for angels, but people don't actually go there? Because I don't see anyone choosing this form of heaven, and angels even hate humans. Honestly, it's something that I have a very hard time accepting when I'm reading or watching television that has anything to do with angels and demons. If the angels hate humanity as much as they do, I cannot buy into any of it, because they are no different than the demons that got cast out for their treatment and belief of humans. So there is just like no difference. So what am I supposed to be doing here? They're at war for what? Also, this angel is sitting here. We were told previously that you go to hell to, you like, do your time until your soul has been redeemed, whatever. So it's more like a purgatory. So that soul is supposed to come back out eventually once it has done what it needs to do to get penance. But she's being damned by these angels that aren't even the freaking creator that does judgment. Maybe Uriel should focus more on like bowing her head to the creator as opposed to trying to take the creator's place, because the creator's not standing over her. But it's just annoying. Returning to Claire's perspective, Claire thinks about how she used to be Catholic and then became agnostic, and doesn't mind so much being the librarian in hell, as you exist here on your own, of your own condemnation, and you get to basically do whatever you want. She is quite happy with her damnation. Now she's just sounding like a rebellious child. Leto and Claire return to the library. Brevity has gotten Hero up and working again. Claire tells Brevity to shut down the whole wing of the Unwritten because they gotta go and do some things. Muses can't go anywhere, so Earth is just gonna have to deal with writer's block. And that has me wondering, are you really telling me that the librarian in hell is in charge of the muses and is in charge of all inspiration on Earth? That is insane. That doesn't seem like a punishment at all. She is the queen of creativity, and whether creativity gets out to Earth, how does that make any sense? This is just a power trip for librarians, saying that the librarians facilitate the creativity of everybody in humanity. Are you kidding me? If this is the case, wouldn't her job then be, and every librarian before that, be to get the inspiration out to the world, to empty out the library of the Unwritten as much as possible, because all of the unwritten books are obviously the fault of the librarian if they are not the ones getting the inspiration kicked out there. Like, I'm just asking for basic logic within the framework of how any of this works, and there is none. And it just turns into the Claire power trip channel. Then, of course, because whenever Claire and Hero are in the same room together, Claire has to insult and belittle Hero, telling him that he is coming with her on her adventure despite calling him pathetic and weak in the exact same sentence. If she thinks that he is just a burden and spends the entire time insulting him rather than being like, you know what? You're great with a sword. You're a hero of your story. I think that you would be a great addition to the team, and we're going to need you. Would you please come with us? Would you please aid us with your abilities? If she's not going to like do that, then why include him? If she doesn't think that he is a benefit to them, then why include him? And then Hero should have been excited to be considered, because he's not in his story being fulfilled as being the hero of that story, but rather now he gets to be a hero here. And if she goes, and then she goes, well, fine, if you don't want to come, you can go sit in the closet with the damsels. Hero should have also just been like, you know what? Hell yeah, I will take care of those damsels so good, they won't even know what hit them. And then she could be like, you know what, that makes me uncomfortable. You're coming with me. I don't care what you think. Like, take your pick. And he could have even just said, no, he doesn't want to go because technically he's not the hero. He's a villain. So why would he want to help her? But, he can lie to her about his reasons for not wanting to go. There are so many ways around this that make more sense for the character than what was actually done here. Claire then not only threatens him with being put in with the damsels if he doesn't protect Claire and Brevity, but also bribes him, saying, I can get the muses to inspire your author if you come, which means you can get back in your book, which she could be BS. I don't know, since I don't know the rules, but if she has that kind of power, again, it just ensures us that she is responsible for every unwritten book, because she is not facilitating the inspiration of the people whose books are unwritten. And then every librarian before her who did not facilitate the writing of these unwritten books is also a failure at their job. Like, what else am I supposed to get from this? We're then taken to the damsel suite where all of these damsels come from, and the damsels are described as women who came out of their books because they were so poorly written by male authors. Because again, this author cannot help but just be really mean unnecessarily. And the reason why there's a damsel suite is because these books became female characters, manifestations of characters, whatever. And since their authors are dead, then they don't need to be forced back in their book because it's unlikely that they will ever be written because their authors are gone. So we're supposed to believe that she is running a tight ship and she hates characters and she makes everybody follow these rules, but then she has a second separate set of rules for specifically damsel characters, female characters that she feels sorry for because they were poorly written by certain types of authors that she has animosity towards. You can't tell me that she is a stickler for the rules and then she literally breaks the rules as fits for her politics. Another way that Claire tries to strong-arm Hero into going with her is by being like, well, I'm sure he would like to just hang out with all the girls because he's a girl. Right. So this book does some things that are, one, straight up insulting the only male character in the main lead. Like, we're not counting Ramil. He's hardly here. He is an antagonist during part of he's partially antagonist because he's hunting down Claire. But Hero is the only male character in the main cast, and he is constantly just there as a punching bag to be belittled and to insult male authors. Oh, and then you have the damsels who are not insulted for being the characters that they are in the way that Hero is insulted for being the character that he is. He's responsible for his identity. They are not. Their male authors are responsible for their identity. So a lot of different elements in this are set up specifically to insult men, while also this book insults women by, one, using them as an insult to this, by belittling this character, by saying, if you like women, if you want to hang out with women, if you enjoy women, whatever, then you're kind of a lesser. And she also, we're going to get there when we get introduced to one of her characters, she made a self-insert character. And she said that she wishes that she had made that character a man because it would have been better, because she believes males are superior. So it's a weird mixture of both. And either way, it's spite. I would definitely say this reads more as man hate. The female insult is much more subtle. So Hero is all bashful once he's told, hey, you're gonna get left behind to be in the room with all of these women if you stay here. And they're all flirting with him. And then there are also some guys in the damsel room, but it's mostly women. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna come with you. How is this Hero guy, who's actually a villain, so just like around being flirted with? It doesn't really make sense. He's like this, I know what it can and try to do, where you've got like the really brash forward guy who has a bit of a little crusty soft heart when actually put in the situation because he's not as like confident as he comes off. You know, it makes me think of Seth Graves, one of Sam's characters, who kind of puts on a look, but then is forward and will say like suck a dick or something. I think he said right. He said like ride or die on his chest, and then he crossed out die, and it was like ride. But like you actually flirt with him. And then he's not expecting you to engage in that way. So then he gets really awkward. So I get what you can do, but this book doesn't really set up Hero to be that character. And in fact, I don't even know what character type Hero is supposed to be inside of his own book. Like, you would think he'd fit some kind of cliche, some kind of stereotype. And then that could have been a thing. As he separates from his author, he starts building his own personality, and you start seeing him develop a personality. And that would be an interesting story, but we don't get to see that. And it's just arbitrary. We're going to get to that in my final closing notes of like the character. Moving over to Leto's POV, they travel through this Raven's path where they have to give away something valuable to get into Valhalla. Here we learn that Brevity was kicked out of the Muse Corps because she stole someone's inspiration instead of giving it to them. Now, I would think if you got in trouble for stealing somebody's inspiration, the last place that you would want to put them is in a library of unwritten books where she could steal more inspiration. That feels like a liability to me. Everybody wakes up on the other side of Raven Way after facing their nightmares, and they're all fine. The crew gets into Valhalla, but in order to talk to Bjorn, they have to earn passage as warriors because only warriors can enter Valhalla. Hero agrees to fight this giant, and then Claire has to fight Bjorn. Now, Hero's fight with the giant is going to be more traditional, where they're using weapons and they're attacking, and Hero is going to win. Meanwhile, the one between Bjorn and Claire is actually a librarian's masturbatory dream, where it's saying some quote from a book and the other person has to say the author of the book. I think they also said the name of the book, but I can't remember. But it's just like trading stuff back and forth. And the way that Bjorn wins is he quotes her book. and she can't answer it. And so this is going to get into like the biggest thing that breaks everything that has to do with the freaking characters being related to the authors and just like flush the beginning 6 chapters out of the window for this book. Also, I'm gonna judge the heck out of Claire for the moment because she is so angsty in her writing. Quote, and hope buoyed like a flag, fragile on the wind. Death was the only freedom. Is that what she said before she died? I wonder if she killed herself, because we don't really know how she kills herself. Even two books in at the moment, I still don't think we know how she killed or how she died. Despite losing, however, Claire proved herself to be a warrior. They're probably just going off of, Hero winning his battle because that's the real battle. And so they go in. Now, apparently it only matters that the creature feature lost, because he said that that thing is going to have a lost honor, but not Claire. Now, once they're inside of Valhalla and sit down with Bjorn, Claire is going to ask how Bjorn knew of her book, and this is where we learn books are completely separate from their authors. Quote, Claire was quiet a moment before saying, the book you quoted, how did you, have you read? I was a librarian, the unwritten wing before your grandfather was a twinkle in anyone's eye. Bjorn's lips curled as he toyed with the edge of the table, running a rough thumb back and forth. I had time in that place to get familiar with lots of books, including yours. My books were there before I was even born? A queer flipped in Claire's stomach, and her mind could not settle on a proper question to ask out of the hundreds that bubbled up. She'd helmed the library for 30 years, and it still felt like a mercurial kind of impossibility. A story was more immortal than its teller. Time had no play there, only potential. Claire had failed both. She looked up to find Bjorn studying her carefully. They were readable. So if a book exists outside of time and before their writer even exists, then how can they be a part of the writer's soul? Because they didn't come out of the writer, because the writer didn't exist when they came into existence. Also, if you separate the writing from the person and they exist before the writer exists, then all of those books were doomed to be unwritten from the start. So you might as well just open up a Night at the Museum style thing with all of these unwritten books, because they were always destined to be unwritten. They were in existence before their author. They will be in existence after the author, and nothing is going to change. Since Claire's mentor disappeared mysteriously and there were rumors that he was attacked, people have been talking that Claire might have traded her soul to the devil to get the job. But then that begs the question, are you joking? Because I thought that running the library was a punishment, and now it's something coveted enough that people are talking about trading their eternal damned souls in order to run the library, that you would have murder plots to run the library because it is such a good job to have. Bjorn, usually you don't make deals with the devil unless it's something you want. Bjorn agrees to help Claire get to the bottom of these page things because he is loyal to the library. I would argue that the codex is not library business, but it is arcane business. However, we are clearly forcing a plot. In the meantime, Bjorn is taking Claire to drink. Angels have already been around, so it's obvious that they care about this thing that is being sought after. And I'm gonna go ahead and say I see a problem. I've obviously pointed out many problems, but also, quote, she trusted Andres. Despite his being a demon, he protected her, taught her, cared for her. Repeat after me. Don't trust a demon. This is going to bite her in the butt. Like, I guess you could just make it up. The angels are obviously bad people, so I guess you could make it up that the demons are actually trustworthy. But right-hand man in hell ousted politically? I would not be left alone in a room with that man, okay? I would not assume that he has given up all of his deceptible ways. Returning to Ramil, all of a sudden, we're calling Ramil Rami in the narrative for no reason. Kind of a bizarre choice, but I digress. He gets to Valhalla while Claire is getting drunk, and all of these Vikings around her, all of the Vikings around her are talking about how hot she is, how much they want to bang her, how incredible it would be to sleep with her because she is so brave. Oh my gosh. And Rami sits down to address Claire about why he is there. Also thinking about how he doesn't hate souls quite as much as Uriel does. He actually has a soft spot for human souls. Kinda defeats having compassion for humans, but I digress. Testing. Now, it's not only the Vikings who are looking at Claire lustfully. Ramil is also starting to heat up a little bit and get some lust vision. It's very random. There's like no romance in this book, but every so often somebody starts getting heated and then it's a passing thought and it's just like, not necessary. I'm also just sitting here going, okay, so demons can enter Valhalla, angels can enter Valhalla, damned souls can enter Valhalla. What is the point for any of the designations? Because they don't seem to mean anything. Again, no limitations. There's no stake. There's no weight to anything. It just is. Now, Ramil's not getting anywhere with his questioning because Claire is not really helping him. She doesn't want to help him. He seems like he is an antagonist to her, and he is not allowed to get violent or start a fight because then all of the Vikings in Valhalla will fight him, and it is prohibited to start fights. And so, yeah, it's not happening. Ramil leaves Valhalla, returns to Uriel, tells her what happened, and Uriel is like, okay, fine, but keep a tab on her because when she gets the paper, we're gonna take them from her, okay? Returning to Claire, who is still in the Valhalla bar, and Bjorn is not happy that Hero is going around talking to various people because it's irresponsible to bring a book character around as it changes them. Claire should know this. Claire should care since he's obviously already not fitting back into his book, and her initial claim was that she wanted to get him back into his book. His author is still alive. So like she is deliberately ruining his chances to go back into his book for what his book is. What this actually comes across as is disrespectful to books because she knows the author is alive. She literally involved Hero in this story by pulling him away from his author, and now she is disfiguring his character so much more so that he will continue to be rejected from his book and that book will never live. Like she is assisting the destruction of books in real life. I don't know how else you're supposed to look at this because she is stopping somebody's character from getting to live in the book that their author created them for. So she wants to act like the arbiter, but she is literally choosing who gets to have their story finished by whether or not she bastardizes the characters in secret outside of the author's imagination. Quote, Claire knew Bjorn's concern as well as any librarian. Hero was a character. He came out of his book with certain skills, certain knowledge, a personality even, all based on who he was in his story. The longer he remained separated from his book and unable to go back, the more likely that would change. If you considered Hero human, it was a good thing. But if you considered Hero what he was, a living portion, only one small part of a larger book, it was making him something other than his original character. It would be harder than ever to fit him back into his pages. It was why, when books woke up, excepting the damsels, they were quickly put back again to sleep. But Claire was the one who dragged him along. She told herself it was necessary. It was his choice if he wanted to change. It came with a strange, guilty foreboding, the idea of giving a character a choice again, and making that again. You know what would actually help in giving this some stakes is that if a character changed from what the author intended, even if like a character can change within their own book and a character can change based on the author's choice of having the character change or the author going through something because the character is undoubtedly tied to the author and the author's soul, if we're going to say that it is a sliver of the soul. But so then imagine if a character came out of a book and was changed, and those changes or the lack of the character in the book, you could go either way, changed the human. So like the human could lose whatever part of themselves came from that character, or some of the bad influences that went into that character then go into the person, and then you literally change reality because you have not done your due diligence to protect the creativity, the sanctity of that soul. And that's why it's so dangerous. Like, I know I'm going off on totally different things here, but I don't understand how we got so far away from characters are related to the authors and there are consequences if you let the characters roam, but also we're treating a character like a full-fledged human, so it's just human 2.0. It feels literally the same thing as what was in Stuart Turton's book, The Last Murder at the End of the World, where they were just humans. They were humans 2.0. Like, we're not supposed to look at them any differently. And it's, as much as I respect characters and what characters are, it's because they are an expression of communication, of somebody's soul, of somebody's feelings, of somebody's experiences put into these stories to pass on to somebody else. And so to me, this feels like a complete insult to writers to just see their characters as not belonging to them, and not only not belonging to them, but downright insulting authors constantly in this. And then two, saying that a librarian basically gets to have one singular person, because it's not even a household of librarians. It is a single person that gets to decide whether your books are changed or not by her interfering with your creativity. And she acts like she's the savior. Everybody acts like she is the savior for stealing your creativity, for stealing and claiming your character. I don't know, this book's given me all kinds of feelings for the choices that it has made, and I'm not sure how else to interpret this. I know that there are different interpretations, but just like, on top of all of that, why do the damsels specifically get excused? And on top of that, if Claire knew this and is such a stickler for the rules, then why did she threaten and bribe Hero to come with her? She really didn't have to, and should have just locked him up for the sanctity of his character and of his author. She is willingly and enthusiastically changing his character so he can never get back into his book and back to the author. This feels like a major ethical violation to me. I don't know. Talking to Bjorn about the codex, he claims that heaven has never understood books, period. They don't have books in heaven. They don't have art in heaven because, like, books and stories would imply, like, an unfulfilled desire or something not finishing. So, like, heaven is perfect, heaven is stagnant, and they don't understand art, period. You know, the place that inspired the Bible. I don't know what people do in heaven anymore. The place that is run by the person called the Creator doesn't understand creation. The Creator who made the platypus and the giraffe and deep sea fishes. Are there any other, like, really obscure kind of... Armadillos are kind of weird. They're cute though, but they're weird. Don't lie. She's told that she needs to leave the books and the library behind in order to focus on following the trail of the codex pages, and she's like, oh my gosh, if I leave the books behind, I'll feel like I'm more human. This has gone into such an overdrive to make friggin' Claire and librarians not like anybody else in the world of existence, and that they're superhuman for liking books. But I haven't gotten the impression that Claire even likes books throughout this. Not to mention, she didn't choose job. It was supposed to be a punishment for her failure on Earth, whatever that was. And for some reason, she offers Hero to stay on Valhalla if he feels like he belongs there, because I guess Nightfall just doesn't need him. I guess the author whom she stole this character from initially just doesn't need him, so he can just... She's still alive. Like, imagine a character being taken from an author and the author just kills themselves because literally a chunk of their soul was taken from them. Like, that's consequence. That would be something that she is responsible for as she is running off with his character. But no. So that, like, she should have just left Hero with his author, because I really don't see a downside to it when you're already traipsing around with the character and destroying him and he's not allowed to go back into his book anyway. That was the whole point of rescuing him, was to get him back in the book. And now, well, now I hear that it eventually turns into a polygamous relationship, so Claire may possibly be recruiting book characters who are underneath her positionally to be in her harem, and I'm sure she is not the first one. Switching over to Brevity's perspective, there is a blurb at the start of this chapter that tells us how special and amazing and OP Claire is over all of the other librarians from the decades past, though she only got a single... and OP Claire is, where every librarian usually gets at least a decade of training, but Claire only got 3 years, and she is so good. She is unbelievably good. In the next book, we're going to hear Brevity say, you know, how abusive Claire has been to all of the books, but at the same time, she's the greatest librarian of all time. On top of this, when we're talking about doing it for 3 years, or having 3 years of training, but instead of 10, she's also been doing this for 30 years. So theoretically, she should have learned along the way, especially because previous librarians leave logs that you would think something about what they're supposed to be doing. Though, it kind of just seems like she's lollygagging around all the time. I don't really know. Hero is rightfully questioning Andres for why he would help a human get these codex pages, and calls him on the fact that demons aren't exactly known for being nice people. Brevity is talking about how muses manipulate people. Quote, so, Brevity had shaped her outside to what Claire needed, a cheerful teenage girl in need of guidance. Her apparent age, her personality, the way that she talked, muses had a knack for understanding what an author needed. This brings us to the idea that humans are just tools for the muses to use to create things, not actual people with souls or meaning or purpose of their own. We get further and further away from the beginning of the story being about the magic of writing an individual mind and creativity more and more, as we get into humans are more and more worthless to these supernatural creatures that just see them as nuisances or 50-cent paintbrushes that can be tossed away at any time. Somehow affecting humans to change them is bad, but not characters who will no longer be a part of the world in which they came from. In Claire's POV, we continuing forward, the group of them, Brevity, Leto, Claire, and Andres, all go to Malta to look for pages of the codex. Hero tries to get away for a second while they're there, but quickly fails. Why doesn't Claire just send him back to the library where he belongs and ground him? Because he clearly doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to be doing this, and he just adds a complication. While we're at it, there is no reason for Leto to be here either. He doesn't have a job with the library. He doesn't owe Claire anything. He's just kind of being dragged around as somebody who doesn't know anything, and maybe it's because Claire is lonely and wants, company, but that's never talked about either. They just feel like side characters that can also glaze Claire so that she is also not just alone. The group is then courted into a collector's shop by some random woman that they don't question, just go inside. It's suspicious. Claire pulls out a gun and shoots the woman. She's got black blood, so not human, it's ink. And now they search the place for the codex pages. Turning over to Ramil, the only important thing we need to remember is he and Uriel are going to Malta because they sense that demonic energy that's coming from Claire and her crew. And we get, quote, a stroke of unease stirred at the back of his thoughts. The state of the realm was tied to belief, but also to the godhead that ruled it. If those two became disconnected, well, Rami wasn't certain of the repercussions. So what happens when beliefs conflict? This is now what I'm wondering. Obviously, the author thinks heaven is boring, but what about the millions upon millions of people that think heaven is paradise? Do you have two separate heavens and you get the heaven that you think exists? We then return to Claire. Turns out that the collection shop lady is actually a book character. The body disappears and returns to the book. Claire is not worried about bringing that book back to the library, nor did she appear to be informed that it was missing. We're going to learn about why that is in just a second. Everything is going swell in here. Don't worry, there's no reason to worry at all. Quote, I wasn't aware that there was an outstanding book missing from the library. Present company excluded. Andres gave a nod to Hero. Claire felt it when a careful, bleak part inside of her unlocked and the familiar guilt tumbled out. She studied the key in her hand. It was tarnished and possibly dull. Claire rubbed at it with her thumb, but it didn't come clean. There isn't. I removed her from the library inventory after I helped her escape. Dun dun dun! Now, my question is, how is this not an immediate removal from station? She can't be doing this in secret. She's in a supernatural library. There has to be some sort of oversight somewhere that happens that feels the energy shift. In the same way that Leto showed up to tell her that Hero was missing. Somebody has to know, right? Otherwise, how else does anybody know when any of them are missing? You don't get to watch them walk out the library. But we're gonna get into this. She helped her own character out of the library. Also, wait a second, there's more. While they're in Malta, there are hellhounds attacking some barrier that is around the city of Medina, and they have come to collect the missing souls of Leto and Claire because they have been out of hell for too long and they don't have their ghost lights or something. And, you're only supposed to be out of hell for 24 hours on a ghost light, so whatever. They've been out too long. Now, while we're listening to these hellhounds, attacking the barrier outside, fortunately, the barrier is strong enough to just show you that there is a threat, but not actually a real threat. Because now we're having this casual conversation with Claire about who this missing character is. Her name is Beatrice, and how Beatrice got out, and how Claire became the steadfast librarian by murdering her mentor so she could help this character escape when the two of them couldn't escape together. Because it's insinuated in this scene that she had a crush on her own character and they were going to run away. And then when they couldn't run away together, then she just helped Beatrice leave while she stayed behind. This then brings up the question of how her mentor disappeared, and there were no alarm bells. There was nobody overseeing any of this, and I have to go back all the way to the beginning. If I even mentioned this before, it might be in my ending notes. I can't remember. But how is there only one person at all running the library? You would think at least everybody mentioned at the top of each paragraph or at the top of each chapter with their own paragraph from the log would just be different librarians all working at the same time to oversee each other, to make sure that this sort of abuse doesn't happen, to make sure that people aren't misusing the library, because this is, and also to make sure that there is still an eye over the library at all times, because it doesn't make sense that you can just abandon it to go and do something else somewhere else and then leave nobody in there and then nobody attacks and tries to conquer it. Andres should have just stayed in the freaking arcane wing and then gone to the library and colonized the library as she was going on this wild goose chase. And then when she came back to the library, he could have taken the pages from her. All done. But so nobody freaking knew that she was the one that murdered her mentor somehow. Demons started to investigate, but didn't really care. And she was just left alone. Now they're gonna flee the city because The angels are also on their way, so they got hellhounds and angels trying to hunt them down. The barrier's not going to hold forever, and they need to get out. It also turns out BT Dubs, this collector's office slash Beatrice, has the other pages of the codex. How she got them, we don't know. Why she has them, we don't know. Does she know what they are? Yes, she does, but how she knows what they are, we don't know. And then how that guy in heaven got one from her, we don't really know. For the next couple of chapters, then we're going to switch to Brevity, who is still in the library of the Unwritten, and she is being attacked by something in there and panicking and hiding under a desk, hyperventilating. So we're just going to like say that that's what's happening because we get a couple of chapters of her, but otherwise we're just going to not acknowledge what's going on with her because it's really just filler at this point. Returning to Leto after briefly angsting over whether or not Claire will betray him. So they're arguing, and after their argument has ended, he asks her who she has sexual relationships with out of nowhere, because clearly she was into Beatrice, but also she had a husband and a daughter at the time. This turns into, oh, so you're pansexual, in the most unnatural conversation possible. And need I remind you that this is a teenager probing a 30-something-year-old woman who she sleeps with. But then it's time to get the codex pages and get the frick out before danger seeps in. Though, one more thing, Claire and Beatrice need to work something out together. Beatrice asks Claire to fix her book after 30 or something years of being here falling apart. So, and during this time, they bicker with how Claire blames Beatrice for everything that happened and also admits that Beatrice was a self-insert that she wishes was a man. In doing this, she also says that Beatrice is the person that she wishes she was. Eventually, she finishes fixing the book and receives the pages which were hidden in the back of the book. Now she needs to talk to Hero, probably because Beatrice was just character assassinating him. It's not surprising since Claire also hates him and they're the same person. So like Beatrice just said stuff about Hero in order to create drama and put daggers between Hero, but like book 2 so far, Beatrice isn't in it. So Beatrice is just a tool for this book, it seems like. She comes into the kitchen, demands Hero's book, then punches him because it turns out that he is not the hero of the story, he is the villain. So one of the things that Beatrice was telling her is that she should not have trusted Hero because he was misrepresenting himself or something. He was lying to you or something like that. And so then she looks in the book and she's like, oh, I've been calling you a hero this whole time, but you're not a hero. You lied to me. Quote, it was more of a failure to correct, Hero grimaced down at the book. You were the one that started calling me a hero. I didn't think that I'd be around long enough for it to matter, but then, well, you're a villain and you're a murderer. Hero snapped. If we're going on about handing out titles, were we supposed to forget that? Don't try to deflect this, bruh. I think it's totally fair. If you're going to start lecturing Hero about whatever you think he is, you murdered an actual person. But she can't hold accountability for herself, and he is just a character who was written the way that he was written by a human. Like, you can't hold that to him and then be like, no, 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 no. I'm not responsible for my murder. Yes, you are. Hero is very much less responsible for his archetype because he, theoretically, did not create himself. Hero, in his bid to try to get free from Claire again, says that he will keep her secret about Beatrice if he can get his book and be set free, but somehow this turns into Claire saying that he needs to redeem himself and listen to her, and he does. So we go from like him threatening her to be like, let me go and I won't tell your secret, to immediately in the same page, her going, no, you need to get my trust, and you need to do it now. And he goes, you know what? You're right. He's really not a villain. Leto then says that he is going to stay here with Beatrice, and she is going to work on a way for him to be released from Hell's Court. How can a book character have anything to do with Hell's Court, let alone a runaway book character that is in hiding? So she's leaving Leto, but she refuses to leave Hero, because that's what Hero wanted. It's funny how immediately after doing this and leaving, she thinks about how if the angels show up at Beatrice's place, then they'll kill Leto. So it looks like she's actually assassinating Leto while saving Hero. She is so dumb. Maybe Leto shouldn't have trusted this admitted murderer who said she killed somebody. Like, she's just ending the loose strings right now. As they leave, Claire is going back on Hero, saying that it doesn't matter that he was a villain because characters are more than their roles. Quote, being a villain, it doesn't matter out there. In the fading light, Hero's eyes were dark, the green of the old earth, distant lands she'd never see. Claire turned away to keep from being distracted. Don't get me wrong, I should have damn well known. But it doesn't matter. You saw the damsels. It doesn't matter what you're made to be, only what you do. Hero's step faltered to match her. For one who calls me book when she's cranky. You're affording me an uncharacteristic amount of humanity. Claire snorted. Well, considering my own story may be coming to an end quite soon, I can afford to be a little flexible. If this is what she was going to do, then why was she throwing a fit literally 5 pages ago about his betrayal? She just says whatever is convenient at the time for dialogue. While escaping, Uriel is attacking, the Hellhounds are attacking, and surprise, Andres the demon turns on Claire. She's really doing, I knew that you were dangerous, but surprise! Quote, Claire's thoughts rabbited in circles. Andres had been Duke's royalty in Hell's court, but he'd been thrown out long ago. He'd been tired, he said. Claire wasn't stupid. She'd always known Andres, like all demons, was dangerous, but he'd also been kind enough to pick her up off the floor after Beatrice left, after Gregor, after Claire had been left alone. She hadn't been alone because Andres had been there. She'd clung to that. She knew he was cruel, but to other people, he was kind to her, and that was supposed to mark the difference. I can't believe they don't just bring old librarians out of retirement when a different librarian dies. That would make more sense than allowing a demon to become the mentor of somebody in a place that you don't want run by demons. The angels fight, battle against Andres. Claire and Hero fall into these wards and into wherever it is they're going now, this portal. Ramiel is still on the battlegrounds talking to Uriel about attacking a human soul. Quote, they have their god. Why should they be protected? All confidence and command were gone, leaving the jagged edge of misery behind. Why should they have anything? The Creator is gone. Gone! She has abandoned us, and that snake has the only means to bring her back. Uriel's ragged voice bounded off the stone and broke. So, Uriel's a traitor to the Creator, and especially in her missing stead, because isn't the point of Hell to give characters another chance, people another chance to be redeemed, at least within this book? Isn't that what it said earlier? Why is Bjorn now in Valhalla? Uriel notes that they got away with the pages, and now they're going to have to go after them and then reckon with Hell. Why do they need these pages to do anything to Hell? Was Hell not a punishment the Creator made for friggin' Lucifer and his kin? Like, does heaven want to colonize Hell? Escaping into the catacombs with Beatrice, Claire decides to go back to deal with the consequences on her own. What that means, who knows? You don't get to see it. Bia also decides to help Claire so that she can leave Leto to escape on his own, because after the fight broke out with the angels and the hellhounds, he fled with them so that he wouldn't die. The whole point here is that Beatrice and Claire ran off to do their thing so that Leto could be left alone to be attacked by Andres in the tunnels, and so Andres could steal the pages from him and disappear. So super convenient. They come back immediately after he is attacked. He is woken up off the ground and the pages are missing. They go through another portal and end up in a dead realm derivative of Duat with a scale to be eaten by an alligator man or to find peace. Here, Claire is informed of Andres's desires, and she is like, you know what? He was a duke, politically ousted from power, but I'd have thought that he'd gotten over that. Oh well, I guess he didn't. She also says that Ramiel is different from the other angels because he didn't join Lucifer out of agreement with his rebellion. Nah, Ramiel saw human beings being neglected by God and Lucifer and dying and starving, and since he was one of the few celestial beings who actually gave a crap about humans, he was teaching them survival skills, and that angered God. As it was an act of rebellion, he got kicked out. I can't believe how terrible literally everyone is in this. Like, yeah, God created these things, but he wanted them to suffer, and seeing you not let them suffer, get smacked. Still failing to see the point of humanity. Leto's being all emo and gonna step on the scale to kill himself again because he learns that souls can just disappear from all of existence and never exist ever again. And as he thinks about like having his soul shredded, he gets this vibe about himself that he has been here before, and this idea of self-harm, and that maybe he killed himself in his past life. So souls can die and just go nowhere. So death is just a second life where you have a job and you can go back to Earth and you can do things. Anyway, Leto walks up to this scale, gets eaten by the alligator head creature, and this creates a bridge over whatever. Claire blames Ramiel for the death because Leto didn't need to do that. It's your fault that we are in this situation. Ramiel is angsting then about Leto killing himself out of fear of the angels, and then goes to heaven to report what happened. Uriel informs him that they're going to invade Hell against the Creator's wishes, wishes. I would just like to tell Uriel this is something that caused Lucifer to fall, defying the wishes of the Lord, thinking that he was more or equal to the Lord. You have angels actively working in rebellion against the all-seeing God, and they're still in heaven. Tell me consequences exist. Ramil is told to be reinstituted once this business with hell is over because he's proven his loyalty or whatever. He lies to her about what he wants to do so that he can chase after the others in hell for his own peace of mind to make sure that they're okay. Returning to Claire, she is now in this labyrinth she has to get through in order to get back to hell. Claire is blaming everybody around her for Leto's death rather than herself for dragging this kid along with her on her business that he had no business being on. Literal child. She describes him as a child, and she did this. Hero is arguing with her. No, Leto was not a child. He was a man and a human, and he should be able to make his own decisions. And I get that what this is trying to do and trying to say with this argument, but I can't help but feel like it's uncomfortable with how much it's highlighted that Leto is a teenager, because it feels like it's saying minors can consent to drastic things. They somehow wander into some version of Hero's story, and someone he knows is still alive. Claire is telling him to calm down, that he is getting too emotional, saying that it isn't real and they can change the story. So I guess the author's vision doesn't matter because she is a librarian. She can curate everybody's stories how she feels like. She can censor everybody's stories how she feels like. She is the determiner of everybody's creativity, the librarian. Weird that she acts like this with him when she was in a room with all of these women who escaped their stories and just let them be real and have lives of their own. But he is just a character and needs to calm the frick down. His emotions are fake. Hero angsts over his author making him a villain, not understanding that what he was trying to do was a revolution against a bad guy, and he doesn't feel connected to his book anymore because of how much his character has changed outside of the book. Claire says that this is why they keep books together, neglecting that she is the reason that his character has changed so much because she's dragged him to Valhalla and back, literally. Hero notes, except for the damsels. And she goes, quote, except the occasional damsel, yes, but only after their author is already dead and gone and there is no risk of damaging a potential book. They can change, grow. The damsels become people. I used to think only damsels did that, but you're proving that wrong. There's more to every one of us than what our stories intend. What a misandrist. She really wants to go, look, I accepted that women can change, but men couldn't. That's what I, with my entire chest, believed, that women could change and men, you know how depressing it is to just like want to have a good time with a book? And instead of having a book that is just like written with fun and like love, you get one that's just spite and mean for no reason, but somebody's unresolved issue with their parents, their pastor, every man in the universe, themselves, and the world. Can I say go to therapy for is that too mean? Now, since the library is being attacked, Brevity tells the damsels to get back in their books because it's safer and she doesn't want harm to come to them. She says that she is going to summon Hero back to the library to help fight against Andres, and all of these female characters, instead of just like saying we would like to help you, or you don't have to treat us with kitty gloves, they choose this moment to again insult men. And this is where the depression really sunk me. I am so upset that this is the book, quote, that brought the protest back in force. I am not being someone's reward again, a princess with white hair said. At least you didn't get fridged in yours, a curvy woman in a pencil skirt slumped into a chair. Where's Claire? Claire is on her way, Brevity faltered, but we might be on our own for now. But now, Brevity raised her hands, no need for distress. We have Hero, and heroes don't do shit, a firm voice spoke up. The damsel wore what might have started as a gauzy peasant gown, but at some point it had been ripped and tied and stitched and paired with utilitarian fatigues until they resembled more of an androgynous apocalyptic soldier than a damsel. They spit and glared with open hostility at Hero. Except die first. They do that well. I don't. They're kind of right, a curvy alien with lavender tentacles said shyly. Your book, our books, suck, Charlotte said, and Brevity really would have to find out where that slang had entered her vocabulary. We're stronger outside of them. She waited until she received some scattered nods from the room. She squared up to Brevity. Give us our weapon. Like, there was more in here that fell into this stereotype, but it's just like, it's depressing. And apparently you can't have any strong female characters without them insulting, belittling, and denigrating men. It's not better when men insult and belittle women. I'm so sick of these arguments and perspectives, and you can't get away from any of it. And honestly, this made me really like the way that this came at me in this book at this moment when everything else was going on, it made me actually consider giving up reading, because who wants to run into this? If like your choices are reading books, which I very much enjoy exploring the stories, even if I don't end up liking the stories. If your choices are running into stuff like this constantly, where they're just mean spirited and malicious and angry for no reason, why make this your hobby? Why explore this and then just get this anger into your soul? It just is like, what is the point? My last note on this section says, this chapter solely exists to make readers reconsider hobby of reading. It was not a good time, okay? I can laugh now because I'm like 2 weeks out from it. It was not a good time. Returning to Ramil, he rescues Leto from certain destruction of his bad thoughts, where he's just like sitting in this void of killing himself again and again and again and again, attempting suicide and abandoning his friends. He is pulled out. He remembers who everyone is and convinces Ramil to break more of the rules to help Claire save the library. And by that, I mean he convinces Ramil to go to hell and fight Andres. Going to Claire, she is angsting before going deeper into the labyrinth, where she runs into Walter, who is now dressed as a minotaur. This is where we learn that he shapeshifts, and he's been like everywhere this whole time. He was the giant that Hero had been facing. I guess they're no longer friends because he's like, well, you're in my labyrinth now and I have to fight you. Sorry, kid, no offense, no bad feelings, but this is my job. Don't worry, she defeats him, cuts his eyes out, and figures out a way to escape. If you think this is the end of him, don't, because he shows up and then they're friendly in the second book, and I don't understand. Ramil and Leto show up where Claire is and pull her out of her stupor that she is in. She's mad, but seeing Leto, who is now human again, actually makes her forgive Ramil because he helped redeem Leto, or helped Leto get out of the pit that he was in where he saw himself as a demon. We also find out that Leto is actually Claire's grandson, someone that she never met, and now she is extra tender for him. Somehow, when this came out in the story, it actually weakens the found family thing for me, because the only reason that Claire cares for anyone in this is they're either a love interest or a literal relative, not choosing family outside of anything but personal interest or lineage. Leto's soul is now declared clean, but he can't touch anything in hell or he's going to be dirtied again. Maybe it would be better to then not drag him into the battlefield of Hell's library at the ending here. Claire invites Ramil to go with her to help take down Andres in the library. Meanwhile, Brevity is going to war. Andres and his demons are taking out the damsels, burning books. Hero is holding his own, but ultimately offers his own demise for the safety of the library. As his pages are ripped out of his book, Claire and them finally get there. The showdown happens with Andres, though, and it's a lot of monologuing at Claire that ultimately doesn't matter. Just, he used her. He brought Leto in to get her all mushy up and manipulate her. She wins in the end anyway. Uriel shows up to finish the scene and get Ramil back. She's apparently upset that a soul was redeemed because Heaven isn't rescuing human souls anymore. I don't know what Heaven spends its time doing. Maybe it's a factory. Maybe it's rented out the space to office workers from Silicon Valley because, you know, they need a place for their offshore funds. You can't audit Heaven. Claire then uses her OP words to snape Uriel out of existence, because what we learn in this final scene is that with Gregory, when she was underneath Gregory, there were these magical words that librarians learn that can literally just erase somebody's existence if you say them. Yeah, it's literal Deus Ex Machina. Magic words to destroy everything. And she does that to Uriel in the final moments. Why she didn't do that to Andres the moment he attacked? Why she didn't do that to the Hellhounds when they attacked? Was it because they were on Earth? Then maybe she should have stayed in the library where she had all the power. Claire fixes Hero's book up again. He comes back to life. She talks to the powers that be in hell. She is in trouble because she abandoned her library and damage was done to the library, and so she is taken off of being the librarian and now moved to be the curator of the arcane junk drawer. And Brevity is now the librarian. Hero and Claire bicker with each other, pretending to be hostile with one another, but it's really just glazing. Ramil is going to become Claire's assistant in the arcane wing, and Hero is going to become Brevity's assistant in the librarian wing, though Hero's got feelings for Claire. The end. So, Congratulations, we've made it through the book one plot. We do need to see out how it goes, and I will not be surprised if in the last book Claire becomes God. Like, she's already there. She's got the magic words. She's the creator of all fiction. Like, if she becomes God, I'll say that makes sense. The genre slash audience for this feels like supernatural fans, librarians with an ego, which is all librarians, and books are my personality style people. Talking about the hook in this book was great. The first scene where Claire opens with her not only explaining what the Library of the Unwritten is, but showing her doing her job and just how gritty it can specifically be when you have to just follow the rules and dehumanize these things that look like people, but they aren't people, but you also know that they are a sort of people, they're related to a people, but you have to treat them a certain way because it affects the people. Like, beautiful, brutal, knowing that it's a child scared of being murdered because of the book that she's from. And Claire very clearly says, nah, fam, you're not human. Get back from where you came from. Shortly after this, we're introduced to the inciting incident, which is a book character has escaped from the library and gone off to meet their author, which creates this drive of motivation, of danger, because a human is in danger of having their entire future wrecked by meeting one of their characters. This book does an excellent job of introducing the central characters, the conflict, and the world building of the very idea of personified books without slowing the story down or dumping into exposition right off the bat. The hook ends before the angels and Lucifer come in and mess the story up, so it feels like a bait and switch, but that's beside the point. The hook is great. The writing. Ramil and Brevity's POVs actively made the book worse and didn't feel necessary. Also, the author does the same random swearing to be quirky in this book that we've talked about in previous books, including the Village of Lights. And I mean, if I looked at my backlog, I could be like, that book and that book and that book all had immature swearing that didn't make sense. And that includes stuff like this, quote, "Then some stupid git with a cosmic quill fucks you over. Librarian, Flora Mikel, 1721 AD. Why is someone from 1721 using fuck like this? Stop doing this. Descriptions. Most of the time, the descriptions were fine. Quote, "The book open on the desk was one of the younger ones, one that still had a chance of being written by its author someday. Brevity had misfiled it with a particularly crotchety series of old unwritten novels, wailing stories, if Claire remembered right. The impressionable young book now had all sorts of rubbish jumbled in its still sprouting narrative. 5-paragraph descriptions of food, meditation on masculinity and the sea, complete nonsense for unwritten tale about teenage witches in love. If its author began to write while it was in this state, she would never attempt another book. It was Claire's job to keep the book ready for their authors in the best possible state. Tidy. Stories were never tidy, but it was important to keep up appearances." So, like, this is immediately introducing you to the prospects of her job and the responsibilities of her job, and then you just see her traipsing around with Hero, destroying his book and his future. For what reason? World building. This book uses blurbs at the start of each chapter that are quotes from different people in regards to world building. Specifically, they were all librarians, leaving behind their knowledge or their thoughts in what is the librarian's logbook, and it continues into book 2. I didn't hate it at first, but as it continued on, I hated it more. And like, then you have to start wondering if it is true information or if it is just their perspective. But also, the logbook for the library is mystical and it can reject information. So you would think that the book would reject anything that is incorrect assumption so that it would only leave information for the next librarian that is accurate to the truth of the universe, but it either doesn't or the different entries contradict. Some of the things we learn is that heaven doesn't have a library, especially not a library of the unwritten for this reason. Quote, "When you consider all of the realms of the afterlife, there are aberrations. To a librarian, heaven is a large aberration. It seems curious that one of the grandest, most belief-fueled realms of paradise does not possess a library of its own. In the minds of its believers, heaven must be perfect, absent nothing, regretting nothing, wanting nothing. It makes sense then that heaven has no wing of our library. What is a story without want, without desire, without need?" So the assumption here is that everybody who believes in heaven does not believe that heaven can have art, can have a book. There is zero appreciation for art at all. What do people do in heaven? And I don't mind mixing mythologies or changing things up, play with it how you want, but part of me has a really hard time with novels using Lucifer in all of his regular glory with the fall, fallen angels, battle against God, but then it also replaces God with some unnamed, unseen female. It's just an odd mixture of Christian theology slash lore while also changing it that's hard to swallow at the same time because it uses some similar things, but doesn't explain anything that it changes. And I assume that it's hard for mythologies, legends, and other religions to be changed bizarrely in the same way. I was willing to buy that the creator was a woman and that this book was doing its own thing with heaven and hell until it brought up Lucifer and the fall. Additionally, quote, the library maintains a prickly kind of alliance separated by realms. If one library falls, it could signal the end of all of them. The library stands together. The only exception to note is the dust which houses all of the works created and lost to time. But the less said about the dark halls, the better. How are you going to tell me that no library can fall, or else it means certain doom for others, and then tell me that there is a part of a library that's already fallen that nobody cares about and it's cool because you can ignore it? Y'all are full of hypocrisy, and I hate that word. Quote, the realms of the afterlife are long-lived, but not static. Realms function off belief and will change as beliefs change. Realms can die if starved of souls, but more often they morph into something closer to legend than to religion. Eternity bends to the whims of mortal imagination. I wonder what we would do if we knew we held such power when we were alive. It's an opportunity. Now, this could have been a story about inspiration and how stories affect people and the world, literally characters coming out of their books and affecting the world and affecting the author, and for the author changing or losing inspiration because they've lost their character or they've lost pages that couldn't be brought back. Instead, it's heaven and hell politics, with all other religions being thrown in out of arbitrary respect to not pick on one true religion. But while doing a hit job on heaven, it betrays where its author's beliefs lie. I also really wonder how there are not multiple librarians of all things, considering all of the wrongs that could happen when people are not watching, and just how many books there are. But you know, if we're gonna reference Bjorn being a pervert in his chapter, which that's like the first thing Claire says about him, what's to say that he didn't sexually assault fictional characters to then shove them back in their books when no one would know? They're already in hell. Logistically and ethically speaking, it doesn't make sense that there is only one librarian at a time surrounded by freaking demons. Finally, on the world building, there is no difference between a dead soul, a living soul, a demon, an angel, a muse, and any other supernatural creature. They're all emotional, irrational, have panic attacks, think they can die, even when they're immortal, and they have all the same weaknesses. It's just it's a second life. It's another form of people just being called the afterlife. Talking about the characters, let's start with Claire. Despite how Claire is introduced as being by the book and not ever caring when a little girl is scared to return to her murder book, she's needlessly angsty the further into the story you go. She should have been a bitter woman angry at other writers because she resented that she failed to write her own thing, put in a hell of her own making where she's reminded of her own failure by all of the unwritten works around her. And that's why she would be so brutal and mean to all of the other books. Her character makes little sense. Behavior makes little sense. And the more I learned about her, the more annoying she was. She's self-righteous, bossy, mean-spirited, judgmental, and has no reason to act as entitled as she does. She's also constantly blaming everybody else for things that are her fault. She ruined Hero. She got Leto killed. She pulled brevity into all of this. She is useless. And she is the one who ended up being unprepared for her own job by killing her mentor, Leto. He's forgettable. He was just used as a tool to motivate freaking Claire. But he gets dragged around, and the entire time he's like, I don't know. He was so low effort that he didn't know why he was in this book to begin with. And then he became not helpful at a certain point, got yeeted out for maybe a third of the book, and then came back when he could be a tool again. Hero. While the introduction of Hero is charming, who his character is quickly falls away. The novel can't decide if it wants Hero to be charming or a loser, nervous and flustered or flirty. When it's brought up that we need to find the lost pages of the codex, he doesn't seem too enthused, despite that he was kicked out of his own story of herodom, or if you look at the actual story of revolutionism, but he is still a driven character based on his own story. You'd think that he'd be excited to be a part of a story or to show off, or he would be hiding away because he doesn't want to help Claire, so he could happily be like, yeah, I'll go hang out with the Damsels. I got no problem with that. Instead, that's used as an insult to scare him into helping her. Lines that made me roll my eyes, quote, especially for a hero. In Claire's experience, heroes of unwritten stories were often the most fragile. All that destiny and tragic backstory, it made it easier to force them into their books, but it left a sour taste in her mouth. Entirely useless. Nothing folded like a hero without a story. Even damsels were sturdier. I'm telling you, the insults were constant, unnecessary, and do not pretend like heroes are the only characters with unnecessarily fragile background. Also, way to say that trauma is something that makes somebody weaker mediocre and useless. Also, as if female characters aren't freaking boarded up with trauma for the sake of freaking holding up a book. Like, are you kidding me? This immediately defanged the hero when he was delightful. At this point, immediately it read like an author bias and a hatred for hero and heroes in fiction and men, period. Hero's entire character just came off like a punching bag of hatred put there for the author to kick for the crime of being male. What's even more stupid about this is the fact that the novel will complain about poorly written female characters stepping out of their books because they were written too heteronormative, but then mock the hero for not being masculine enough, or the right type of masculine. Beyond hypocritical, if a female character doesn't have to be a certain way, then why are you acting like a male character has to be a certain way? There are different ways of self-expression. There are different ways to be, and it doesn't make you a worse, a weaker, or a disgusting person to have different forms of personal expression. I also find it insane that Claire, a person with likes and dislikes of her own, but she seemingly hates books. She comes off as downright hating books and creativity, which resentment is where I'm going with that. Maybe it's her own chip on the shoulder since she's in hell, but bro, I would not trust this woman to be in charge of the library of the Unwritten. She would be freaking making blunts out of the pages to screw over other people's creativity. She'd be vengeful and stopping others from achieving because she never achieved. The magic is gone and she'll burn the library down herself. She shuts down the muses, says everybody on Earth just gets to have freaking writer's block because. And in the next book, it's going to be like, she didn't deserve to be kicked out of the library. Yes, she did. She did a garbage job and she was selfish. She doesn't respect books. She doesn't respect other people's creativity. She thinks that she should get to rewrite everybody's books as she sees fit. She shows it consistently in this book. I wanted to see Hero devoted to getting his writer writing again, especially after the way that we were introduced, especially after we were told that no one has connections to a character like the authors do, but instead he gets distracted with admiring Claire and his writer becomes nothing. Switching over to brevity, she is called an ex-muse, but what does that even mean? All she's got is kicked out of being a muse because she stole someone's inspiration and also ended up keeping the inspiration, so she didn't even get the contraband taken away from her, and there is an author wandering around or who died without creating what they were supposed to create because brevity stole the inspiration that they were supposed to have. And brevity did nothing with it. She is such an unneeded character and only exists to be Claire's biggest stan, and so far in the second book, she's literally just used to be like, no, Claire is better than you. This entire time, Claire's better. Ramiel / Uriel. I hate them. I just hate how this author approaches heaven in general. So, of course, the angels are nothing but a stereotype of henchmen. Andres also makes no sense. We get no sense of who Claire was before she died or why she would trust Andres. And that could be, you know, out of desperation to have a friend, out of desperation of loneliness. She thought that she was a terrible person because she murdered her mentor and now she had nobody. And this guy walked up and she's like, he's a demon. I shouldn't trust him. But maybe that means, you know, he'll see things a little my way and be a little more understanding and I don't have to worry about him questioning. Like, he could have even introduced himself as having known and been like, you know, I get why you did what you got to stick up for the people that you are your family, are you, like, I get it. So he could have had so many ways of getting in there, but he was just set up to be the brightest, obvious villain from the beginning of ever. Another thing, what's the difference in where people go when you're gonna bring up Duat, Valhalla, Hell, Heaven, and an array of other places? What's the difference in them? And how is Heaven ignorant of the library of the Unwritten when they are literally aware of librarians? Somehow, 0 librarians of the Unwritten or in general have ever gone to Heaven throughout the entirety of history once they finish their due time in the library and then get to choose where they get to go next. This book just reads so biased in the perspective of the author. The choices don't make sense but to be hateful. Finally, there's Bjorn. Clearly, he would sleep with the Unwritten. I need to know how many Unwritten he slept with. How big was his harem when he was the librarian? The librarian seems like a perfect job for people who want to be absolutely terrible people to others with no oversight, because you can abuse the fictional creatures and then throw them back into a book. Fanfictionists out here are gonna freaking line up to die with their unfinished fanfics just so that they can become librarians to sleep with their favorite characters. Now, isn't that a scary thought? Plot. This book sets up a false premise having to do with a hero being spurned by his writer and the pages of his story being burned, thus his book rejects him. The plot becomes this friggin' Devil's Codex quest chasing across the world, friggin' really in Medina, and Hero isn't necessary for anything. He doesn't even need to be on this quest. It feels like such a scam of an opener, and it is such a good opener. This book should have been about trying to get Hero back into his book, the inspiration of people, what it's about, because, and And even Claire growing from herself because she sees a version of herself maybe in Nightfall's author, because she gave up. She has unwritten stuff. And then she could have like connected with that author who she had been judging before as being a freaking loser for writing a book called Nightfall. Like, it could have invigorated even her own creativity, her compassion that she had lost. There are so many places where this could have gone to be more a celebration of creativity and how we inspire each other or are inspired ourselves, but it didn't do that. And instead, it just made everybody's creativity beholden to Claire. And it could have even referenced stuff like the major loss to the world and the inspirations that other people get from works when an author gives up on what they've been working on. Whatever potential story about writing in books and character that it introduces in the first couple of chapters is lost immediately for freaking heaven, hell, garbage politics left over from having to wake up to go to Sunday school from when this author was in 5th grade. Sorry, that's personal. It's just a joke. I'm just annoyed. Themes and other comments. Can't have librarians without freaking mentioning book burnings and being like it is the holy grail of evil thing. Quickly drops into this trope of demons good, heaven bad, absent God, replace God. Well, none of the other afterlives get hit job. This reads so unbelievably biased when it doesn't need to be, especially when you're using other forms of heaven or the afterlife for the righteous, but you only insult the Christian heaven that, quote, everything is perfect and they have no art because art is frowned upon. Cringe. And also, quote, you called them damsels. Stupid name, said the girl in pigtails, sitting to the right. She met their looks with a wrinkled nose. We ain't even all girl. It's just a category, Claire said. Sometimes a book wakes up as a character that has reasons to be dissatisfied with their stories. No agency, flatly written, just another reward for the hero. Heteronormative bullshit, the girl added. It would be improper to be amused right now. As she says, Claire agreed. They have no interest in living it out. They're happy their stories have gone unwritten. We call them damsels because most of the time they're women. Wonder why that is. Does she have an area for the poorly written men? Does she offer the poorly written men the same grace when they come out of their book and they are unhappy with being freaking Zayd from Haunting Avalon? I don't know. Also, this fourth wall breaking lecture is not the only one. Just continuing the thing that pretends bad writing is a gendered issue is also annoying. I don't care if it's men pretending no woman can write or women pretending that no men can write. It's an annoying conversation. Also, how are these characters in books making judgments on themselves of what is good and poorly written? They wouldn't know. All they know is the reality of the book in which they came from. The only people that can cast judgment on them are people like Claire who are from outside of a book, who look at everything else and judge everything else. Now the author is giving characters sentience to determine something as subjective of good and bad when theoretically they should have been born as part of their author. Additionally, the book can't stop insulting men throughout it. Male characters are constantly belittled as weak, insulted as being not good enough, lecherous, perverts, unworthy, when there is no humbling of the female characters, especially Claire. It just reeks of author bias to me. Also, this book refers to God with a lowercase while using it in a proper noun setting. Now, I know many do this, thinking that they are pioning the Christians by just not capitalizing it, but you just look uneducated and spiteful when God is clearly a proper name and you're doing bad grammar to pion the Christians. It's not edgy. It's not cool. If you think that it's worth the sacrifice of legitimacy, I'm gonna say go wash off the eyeliner running down your emo face. And that's an insult to the emo look because that's my generation, kids. You don't want to see my emo pictures. Then we've got this, quote, it's not magic, what we librarians do. It's the same as what our imaginations tried to do when we were alive. The realm just takes a more literal interpretation of it. The pen and paper are a librarian's tools of the office. With them, we can weave stories back together by force of will, guide lost ink, draw a plot back to its true north. Without them, we're just exceptionally long-lived busybodies. Then again, sometimes busybodies are the only ones to get anything done. So more librarian glazing, and we're going to go back and forth in this story saying that librarians are allowed to touch stories and change stories, but also librarians can't actually touch stories, and the stories will reject it when librarians try to change authors' words. Make it make sense. Not only that, but this violates what it said earlier, claiming that librarians couldn't and weren't the ones to write other people's stories, couldn't finish the stories, but could only heal them, could only maintain them. Now it's saying that librarians can take over any and all writing, and they are the sources of everything. I guess, why does anything exist to create, since librarians are the only ones who can ever do anything ever? Last thing that I wanted to mention on themes requires this quote. No story is insignificant. That's what the existence of the unwritten wing teaches us. No escapist fantasy, no far-off dream, no remembered stuff. Every story has meaning, has power. Every story has the power to sustain, the power to destroy, the power to create. Stories shape time, for Pete's sake. Once upon a time, long, long ago, somebody, someday, and then what happened? Living author or dead, written or not, your story shakes the world. That's common sense to amuse, and the idea librarians are supposed to honor. That every story, every human matters. The hard part is convincing ourselves first. This novel will wax on about the power of stories and how every author is significant, while also spending immense time within the fiction insulting authors, both the male writers who write the damsels that then go on to insult those writers for how they were written as characters and were only good once the characters stopped being what their authors intended them to be, and Hero, who had the same fate, who was insulted by Claire, who also insulted the book that Hero came from. There is no appreciation for writing in this book. It's only if you write the correct things, and Claire wants to correct everything to be in her specific direction, her specific taste. It's a message that's contradicted by the fact that the novel has personal and political insults to dole out at specific targets that then contradict other parts of the book as we see them in operation and through the ways in which these characters talk. Because this is a quote from Brevity, who has also in character insulted male writers for writing characters that she doesn't like, it deflates her entire statement. So I don't know what this is doing. It acts as if this book is about empowering writers and saying how awesome you are, but you have to be the right kind of writer or else get berated constantly. I think instead of being holier than thou in the narration, the characters needed to admit to themselves that they didn't believe every book was worth preserving, because that came through in the actions of these characters and how they thought certain books should be changed by their hands, by their choices until they were good enough for them, was really gross. Overall, this book was amazing in how quickly this idea delved into nonsense, and I actually felt bad sharing it when I was at 10%. No more will I recommend books that I am enjoying until I've finished them and I've decided, you know what? Yes, I can recommend this. Shame on me for trusting this author despite every stereotype about the way that she looks, the way the book was written, the subject of the book. Shame on me for giving somebody my trust. This novel wants to use the characters to judge ideas of authors, such as the random Puritan character who was a symbol of purity from the Neanderthals, and all of the other damsels who are just victims of their male authors, but then uses Hero as an example of a bad person and not a stereotype by a female author's bad writing. The biases are clear and constant, breaking the world building to the point of preaching personal political beliefs, which is truly disappointing when the idea of this book could have been something great. I wish this book had stayed in the library of the Unwritten itself. Those are my thoughts. So with that said, have you read this book? Will you read this book? Looking forward to your comments down below and the conversation surrounding this. Until next time, thank you for joining me. Have a great weekend, and don't die.
To my children, Tommy, Ike, and Annabelle, if you forget everything else I ever said in the lifetime we shared together, I need you to remember 3 things. 1. Minimize violence done to and by women. As givers of life, it's against their nature, God's design, to do harm, and every act of violence done to them is meant to break their souls, turning what should be a giver of hope into a black widow. A woman who destroys the life and the mercy of her care for no other reason but the corruption of her own self. It is only when you come across these kinds of women that you should put them down, for they are no better than the men who tarnished them. However, take no glee in what must be done. Finding any life so far gone, a black hole is where someone's heart should be, leaves only one solution: the mercy of death, and it's a tragedy when it happens. Make no mistake, a woman's love is the most powerful thing on this earth. It can start wars, end them, and change the devil himself into someone God sees worthy of giving a second chance. She don't owe this love to anyone, but she do carry it around with her so long as she's living. That is why the devil will do everything he can to pervert women's nature and destroy their innocence. Of every crime you can commit during your lifetime, be it out of daring or necessity, For every defiance you may act out against God, government, or man. Avoid harming the innocent. For the day that we become bloodthirsty beasts where love don't exist anymore is the day hell on earth has come. And as bad as it may seem at times nowadays, we ain't there yet. 2. Everything you do in your life will create consequences, both seen and unseen, extending further than you can imagine. Nothing you do exists solely within your arm's reach. Think about every decision you make, every action you take, because you won't know how long your choices will stalk you, be them destructions or blessings, rumors or history been made. The truth of the matter is, your life will be controlled not by the truth of what you've done, but by the way others carry on about you. And the thoughts of others are more real in the long term than what you know to be true. It won't stop affecting you just because it ain't real, and no matter the life you've lived, most men can't outrun what's written in them in ink. It ain't hopeless though. Be firm in knowing who you are outside of the noise, and live beyond the means of the news of the day. 3. There ain't anything stronger than a family you build for yourself. What you put together is worth fighting for. Protect your loved ones with your life, and they'll give theirs in return. Family ain't defined by blood, understand that. And for as strong as the bonds of your family are, know that you'll find just as much passion in the people who hate you. While you'll risk your life for those you care about, those who find your existence to be an insult to theirs will risk themselves to put an end to their affliction. As cruel as it may seem, a man who hates you will stop at nothing until one of you is dead. It's a mistake to believe anything different. Don't let you be the ones taken from, be it by outlaw lawmen or by someone in between. The only one who'll be looking out for you is you and your kin. Maybe there's another way to be, but in all my years I've seen the worst of man, I ain't found another way around man's desire to conquer against all else. There ain't a changing of that mind, and sometimes I believe there ain't the ability for man to change at all, least of all through lead or legislation. I ain't claiming to be right about nothing. On many things, I don't want to be right. But what I do want is for my kids to live a better life than the one I did and avoid the mistakes that I made while finding the truth and purpose in what matter more than gold in this country. It's my hope that by sharing the things I learned that my kids will be better than their old man ever was, and that what I done isn't what people remember me for, but who y'all are going to become. That'll be the legend of Bill Cassidy.